Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into something that happened so long ago it makes your oldest family stories look like yesterday's news. We're talking about the moment when Earth got its most famous tenants, creatures so iconic they've captured imaginations for generations. Dinosaurs. But here's the thing. Most people think they know when dinosaurs showed up on this planet. They're wrong. The story of when dinosaurs first appeared is way more complicated, way more mysterious, and honestly, way more fascinating than you probably think. So before we get started, take a moment to like this video if you're ready to have your assumptions challenged, and subscribe if you genuinely want to learn something that'll change how you see natural history. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what you thought you knew about dinosaur origins before clicking on this video. It's always amazing to see how widespread these misconceptions really are. Now, settle in, maybe grab a drink, and let's journey back to a time when Earth was almost unrecognizable. A time when the very concept of what we call a dinosaur was just beginning to take shape in the evolutionary theatre of our planet. Picture this. It's 243 million years ago, give or take a few million years, because honestly, when you're dealing with deep time, precision gets a little fuzzy. The world doesn't look anything like the Earth you know. There's no Atlantic Ocean. There's no Amazon rainforest. There are no polar ice caps. Instead, there's this massive supercontinent called Pangaea, shaped like a giant letter C, stretching across the equator and extending toward both poles. The climate is brutal. Most of the interior is scorching desert, the kind of heat that would make Death Valley feel like a pleasant spring afternoon. And in this alien landscape, something remarkable is happening. Life is experimenting. It's trying new forms, new strategies, new ways to survive in a world that's still recovering from the most devastating mass extinction in Earth's history. The Great Dying, as scientists call it, had wiped out more than 90% of all species just a few million years earlier. But life, as it always does, was finding a way. Deep in what we now call Tanzania, near the shores of an ancient lake, a creature no bigger than a medium-sized dog is going about its daily business. It's walking upright on two legs, which is unusual for its time. Its bones are growing rapidly, faster than most of its contemporaries, and it's carrying in its skeleton the blueprint for what would become one of the most successful groups of animals in Earth's history. This creature has a name now, Nyasasaurus. And it might just be the earliest dinosaur we've ever found. But here's where things get interesting. The story of Nyasasaurus isn't just about ancient bones and deep time. It's about human curiosity, scientific persistence, and the strange ways that discoveries sometimes hide in plain sight for decades before anyone realizes what they're looking at. In the 1930s, a man named Francis Rex Parrington was collecting fossils in the Ruhuhu Basin of Tanzania. He found some bone fragments that looked interesting, different somehow from the other fossils in the area. These bones made their way back to England, where they sat in a collection, waiting, and waiting, and waiting some more. It wasn't until 1956 that a doctoral student named Alan Charig took a closer look at these fragments and realized they might be something special. He described them in his thesis as potentially representing an early dinosaur. But even then, the bones weren't formally described to the scientific community. They just sat there, holding their secrets for another 57 years. Think about that for a moment. The potentially earliest dinosaur ever discovered spent more than half a century essentially forgotten in a collection, while paleontologists around the world searched for evidence of early dinosaur evolution. It's like having the missing piece of a jigsaw puzzle sitting in your drawer while you tear the house apart looking for it. Finally, in 2013, a team of researchers led by Sterling Nesbitt took another look at these fragments. What they found revolutionized our understanding of when dinosaurs first appeared on Earth. The bones showed characteristics that were unmistakably dinosaurian. A distinctive long deltapectoral crest on the upper arm bone, rapid bone growth patterns visible under microscopic analysis, Features that mark this creature as either the earliest known dinosaur or something so close to the earliest dinosaur that the distinction barely mattered. But Nyasasaurus wasn't alone in rewriting the story of dinosaur origins. Thousands of miles away, in the Badlands of Argentina, another chapter in this story was being written in stone. The Isquigualasto Formation in northwestern Argentina is one of those places that paleontologists dream about. It's a late Triassic geological formation that preserves an entire ancient ecosystem from about 230 million years ago. The rocks here tell the story of a world very different from our own, a world of volcanic activity, seasonal flooding, and forests dominated by giant conifers and ferns. And it was in these rocks that paleontologists found some of the most complete early dinosaur fossils ever discovered. In 1959, an Andean goat herd named Victorino Herrera was doing what goat herds do, keeping an eye on his animals while they grazed in the rugged landscape near San Juan, Argentina. But Herrera had a keen eye, and he noticed something unusual in the rock outcrops. Bones. Big bones. Strange bones that didn't look like anything he'd seen before. Herrera reported his discovery, and eventually paleontologists arrived to investigate. What they found was extraordinary. A nearly complete skeleton of a predatory dinosaur that would eventually be named Herrerasaurus, after the goat herd who first spotted it. Herrerasaurus was not a small, tentative creature like Nyasasaurus. This was a formidable predator, measuring about 20 feet in length and weighing as much as a large motorcycle. It walked on two powerful legs, had a long skull filled with sharp teeth, and possessed all the hallmarks of a sophisticated hunting machine. But perhaps most importantly, Herrerasaurus lived during the same general time period as other early dinosaurs, providing crucial evidence about the diversity and rapid evolution of the earliest dinosaur communities. The discovery of Herrerasaurus also highlighted something important about early dinosaur evolution. These weren't primitive, clumsy experiments in reptilian design. They were sophisticated animals that had already developed many of the characteristics that would make dinosaurs so successful over the following 165 million years. But even Herrerasaurus wasn't the most complete picture of early dinosaur life that Argentina would provide. That honor goes to a much smaller creature with a name that perfectly captures its significance in the story of dinosaur evolution. In 1991, University of San Juan paleontologist Ricardo Martinez was conducting fieldwork in the same Isquigualasto formation that had yielded Herrerasaurus. Martinez and his team were systematically working through the late Triassic rocks, looking for any signs of ancient life preserved in stone. What they found was a skeleton so complete and so well preserved that it would become one of the most important dinosaur discoveries of the 20th century. They had found Eoraptor, the dawn runner, a small dinosaur that lived approximately 231 to 228 million years ago. Eoraptor was tiny by dinosaur standards, measuring only about 4 feet in length and weighing less than 22 pounds. But what it lacked in size, it made up for in scientific significance. The skeleton was almost completely intact, providing paleontologists with unprecedented detail about early dinosaur anatomy, behavior, and lifestyle. One of the most fascinating aspects of Eoraptor was its teeth. Unlike later dinosaurs that would specialize in either meat-eating or plant-eating, Eoraptor had multiple types of teeth in its mouth. Some were sharp and serrated like those of meat-eaters. Others were leaf-shaped, like those of plant-eaters. This dental diversity suggested that Eoraptor was omnivorous, eating whatever was available in its late Triassic environment. This dietary flexibility was probably crucial to Eoraptor's survival. The late Triassic world was a competitive place, filled with various groups of reptiles, all vying for dominance. The ability to eat both plants and animals would have given Eoraptor and other early dinosaurs a significant advantage in this harsh environment. The discovery of Eoraptor also provided important clues about early dinosaur behavior and ecology. Analysis of the surrounding rock layers and associated fossils revealed that Eoraptor lived in a diverse ecosystem that included early mammals, various reptiles, and a rich plant community dominated by ferns, horsetails, and giant conifer trees. But perhaps most importantly, the discoveries in Argentina revealed something that challenged long-held assumptions about early dinosaur dominance. When paleontologists tallied up all the fossils from the Isquigualasto Formation, they found that dinosaur remains represented only about 6% of the total sample. This meant that early dinosaurs were actually quite rare compared to other reptile groups living at the same time. This revelation fundamentally changed how scientists thought about early dinosaur evolution. Rather than being immediately dominant, dinosaurs started as a relatively minor group, competing with numerous other reptile lineages for survival and ecological success. The world that these early dinosaurs inhabited was unlike anything we see today. The late Triassic period was characterized by extreme climate conditions created by the massive supercontinent Pangaea. With most of Earth's landmass concentrated in one enormous continent, the climate was highly seasonal and often harsh. The interior of Pangaea was dominated by vast deserts, where temperatures could reach scorching levels during the day and drop dramatically at night. There were no polar ice caps, and even the regions near the poles were warm and humid, supporting forests and diverse animal communities. But perhaps most significantly, the late Triassic world was dominated by monsoon systems, unlike anything in the modern world. The massive size of Pangaea and its position relative to the global ocean created intense cross-equatorial monsoons that brought dramatic seasonal variations in rainfall and temperature. These environmental conditions created both challenges and opportunities for early dinosaurs. The extreme seasonality meant that resources could be abundant during certain times of the year and scarce during others. This may have favored animals that were adaptable, efficient, and capable of surviving on varied diets, exactly the characteristics that early dinosaurs like Eoraptor possessed. The story of when dinosaurs first appeared on Earth is ultimately a story about opportunity, adaptation, and the unpredictable nature of evolution. These early dinosaurs didn't emerge into an empty world waiting to be conquered. They evolved in a crowded, competitive environment filled with other successful reptile groups. What made dinosaurs special wasn't necessarily that they were bigger, stronger, or more ferocious than their competitors. Instead, early dinosaurs succeeded because they were adaptable, efficient, and perhaps most importantly, they possessed certain anatomical and physiological advantages that would serve them well in the changing world of the Mesozoic era. One of the most significant advantages that early dinosaurs possessed was their upright posture. Unlike many of their contemporaries, which had sprawling limbs extending out from their sides, dinosaurs evolved an upright stance with their legs positioned directly beneath their bodies. This seemingly simple change in anatomy provided enormous advantages in terms of locomotion efficiency and metabolic performance. The upright posture allowed dinosaurs to move more efficiently, covering greater distances with less energy expenditure. It also enabled them to grow to larger sizes without the mechanical constraints that limited sprawling animals. Most importantly, it may have given them advantages in thermoregulation, allowing them to better control their body temperature in the extreme climate conditions of the Triassic world. Another crucial advantage that early dinosaurs possessed was their metabolic capabilities. Recent research suggests that dinosaurs may have been better adapted to conserving water than many of their competitors. In the arid climate of Pangaea, the ability to efficiently manage water resources would have been a significant survival advantage. Modern birds and crocodilians, the living descendants of dinosaurs, excrete uric acid rather than liquid urine. This adaptation allows them to conserve water by excreting waste as a paste rather than dilute liquid. It's reasonable to assume that early dinosaurs possessed similar water conservation mechanisms giving them an edge in the harsh, dry conditions that characterized much of the Triassic world. But early dinosaurs didn't just succeed because of their individual adaptations. They also benefited from some remarkable strokes of evolutionary luck, particularly when it came to mass extinction events that eliminated many of their competitors. The end of the Triassic Period, approximately 201 million years ago, was marked by another major extinction event that fundamentally reshuffled the deck of terrestrial life. This extinction, known as the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event, wiped out many of the dominant reptile groups that had been competing with dinosaurs for ecological supremacy. The victims of this extinction included the etosaurs, heavily armored herbivores that looked like reptilian tanks; the ornithosuchids, active predators that in many ways resembled early dinosaurs; the phytosaurs, crocodile-like semi-aquatic predators that dominated freshwater environments; and perhaps most significantly, the rauisuchians, massive terrestrial predators that had been among the apex predators of the late Triassic world. What caused this extinction event is still hotly debated among scientists. Some evidence points to massive volcanic eruptions associated with the breakup of Pangaea. Others suggest climate change triggered by shifting ocean patterns. Still others propose asteroid impacts or a combination of multiple factors. But whatever caused the extinction, its effects were dramatic. Many of the reptile groups that had been more successful than dinosaurs during the late Triassic simply disappeared from the fossil record. Meanwhile, dinosaurs not only survived, but thrived in the aftermath. This survival wasn't just luck, Recent research suggests that dinosaurs may have been better adapted to cold conditions than many of their competitors. While the late Triassic world was generally hot, there were periodic cold snaps, particularly at higher latitudes. Dinosaurs that had already adapted to these cooler conditions were better positioned to survive when cold periods became more widespread during the extinction event. The evidence for this cold adaptation comes from an unexpected source: the geographic distribution of late Triassic dinosaur fossils. Many early dinosaur species have been found in rock formations that were deposited at relatively high latitudes during the Triassic, suggesting that dinosaurs were already living in cooler environments while their competitors dominated the warmer equatorial regions. When the end Triassic extinction struck, the cold conditions that dinosaurs were already adapted to spread to lower latitudes, eliminating the cold-blooded reptiles that had previously dominated those regions. Dinosaurs, already equipped for cooler temperatures, were able to expand into newly available ecological niches. This scenario helps explain one of the great mysteries of early dinosaur evolution: why dinosaurs were relatively rare during the late Triassic, but became dominant so quickly in the subsequent Jurassic period. They weren't necessarily better competitors in the warm, arid conditions of the late Triassic world, but they were better adapted to survive the changing conditions that came with the end Triassic extinction. The story of early dinosaur evolution also reveals something fascinating about the role of body size in evolutionary success. For much of the history of paleontology, scientists assumed that the ancestor of all dinosaurs was a medium-sized animal, similar to early discoveries like Herrerasaurus or Eoraptor. But recent research has turned this assumption upside down. Analysis of early dinosaur relationships and body size evolution suggests that the common ancestor of dinosaurs and their closest relatives was actually quite small, possibly no larger than a house cat. This miniaturization event near the base of the dinosaur family tree had profound implications for early dinosaur evolution and ecology. Small body size provided several evolutionary advantages, including reduced resource requirements, the ability to exploit new ecological niches, and improved survival during environmental stress. The small size of early dinosaurs may also explain one of the puzzling aspects of their fossil record. Despite the fact that dinosaurs must have been evolving during the early and middle Triassic periods, fossils from this time are extremely rare. For decades, Paleontologists wondered whether this absence reflected a true scarcity of early dinosaurs or simply gaps in the fossil record. The discovery that early dinosaurs were much smaller than previously thought suggests that their absence from early and middle Triassic fossil sites is primarily a preservation issue. Small animals are much less likely to be preserved as fossils than large ones, simply because their bones are more fragile and more easily destroyed by natural processes. This realization has important implications for our understanding of early dinosaur diversity and distribution. Rather than being rare or geographically restricted, early dinosaurs may have been more common than the fossil record suggests. They were simply too small to be preserved in most geological settings. The miniaturization of early dinosaurs also helps explain some of the key innovations that would later make dinosaurs so successful. Small body size may have facilitated the evolution of features like fuzzy integument, the precursor to both dinosaur feathers and pterosaur fur. It may have also contributed to the high metabolic rates that allowed dinosaurs to be more active than many of their contemporaries. As we piece together the story of early dinosaur evolution, we're also learning about the incredible diversity that existed among these ancient animals, even in their earliest stages. The traditional image of early dinosaurs as uniform, primitive reptiles is giving way to a more nuanced understanding of their ecological and morphological diversity. Consider the dietary strategies of early dinosaurs. While Herrerasaurus was clearly a dedicated predator with sharp, serrated teeth designed for slicing meat, Eoraptor showed evidence of a more generalized diet with different types of teeth adapted for processing both plant and animal material. This dietary diversity suggests that early dinosaurs were rapidly diversifying into different ecological roles, much like modern mammals or birds do when they colonize new environments. Rather than being evolutionary dead ends or primitive experiments, early dinosaurs were dynamic, adaptable animals that were already beginning to explore the full range of lifestyles that would characterize dinosaurs throughout the Mesozoic era. The heterodont dentition of Eoraptor is particularly fascinating because it represents a transitional condition between the specialized teeth of later dinosaur groups. The front teeth were recurved and serrated like those of meat-eating theropods, while the back teeth were leaf-shaped like those of plant-eating sauropodomorphs. This mixed tooth pattern suggests that the common ancestor of major dinosaur groups was probably omnivorous, and that the strict dietary specializations we see in later dinosaurs evolved from this more generalized condition. It's a perfect example of how evolution often works through the modification of existing structures rather than the creation of entirely new ones. The environmental context in which these early dinosaurs lived is equally fascinating. The late Triassic ecosystems, preserved in places like the Ishigualasto Formation, provide a window into a world that was both familiar and alien. Familiar because the basic structure of terrestrial ecosystems was recognizable. There were primary producers in the form of plants, primary consumers that ate those plants, and secondary consumers that ate the plant eaters. But alien because the specific organisms filling these roles were unlike anything in the modern world. The plant communities of the late Triassic were dominated by conifers, ferns, and horsetails. These were not the flowering plants that dominate modern ecosystems, but rather more ancient lineages that created very different forest structures and resource distributions. The conifer forests of the late Triassic were composed of trees like Proto-Juniper oxylon, giant relatives of modern junipers that could reach enormous sizes. These forests were interspersed with areas dominated by ferns like Cladophlebis and horsetails that created dense understory vegetation. This plant community would have provided abundant resources for herbivorous animals, but the distribution and quality of those resources would have been very different from modern ecosystems. Early dinosaurs and their competitors had to adapt to this unique resource landscape, and their success or failure often depended on how well they could exploit the available plant communities. The animal communities of late Triassic ecosystems were equally distinctive. In addition to early dinosaurs, These environments were home to a diverse array of other reptiles, early mammals and amphibians. Cynodonts, the advanced mammal-like reptiles that would eventually give rise to true mammals, were common components of these ecosystems. Dicynodonts, bizarre herbivorous reptiles with turtle-like beaks and tusk-like teeth, filled many of the large herbivore niches that would later be occupied by dinosaurs. Perhaps most importantly for understanding dinosaur evolution, these ecosystems also contained numerous other archosaur groups that were direct competitors with early dinosaurs. The etosaurs were heavily armored herbivores that occupied many of the same ecological niches that would later be filled by armored dinosaurs like ankylosaurs. The Rauisuchians were large terrestrial predators that competed directly with carnivorous dinosaurs for prey and territory. The fact that early dinosaurs were relatively rare in these diverse ecosystems tells us something important about their initial evolutionary success. They weren't immediately dominant or obviously superior to their competitors. Instead, they were one of many experiments in archosaur evolution, competing for resources and ecological space in crowded, dynamic environments. This perspective fundamentally changes how we think about early dinosaur evolution. Rather than being destined for dominance, early dinosaurs succeeded through a combination of good adaptations, environmental changes, and evolutionary luck. Their story is one of gradual success rather than immediate triumph, of adaptation and opportunity rather than inevitable superiority. The fossil sites that preserve early dinosaur remains also tell us about the geological and environmental processes that were shaping the late Triassic world. The Ischigualasto Formation, for example, represents deposits from a volcanically active floodplain system that was subject to intense seasonal variations in rainfall and river flow. The paleo-environmental reconstruction of this ancient landscape reveals a world of dramatic contrasts. During wet seasons, the region would have been covered by lush forests and flowing rivers that supported diverse animal communities. During dry seasons, these same areas would have become arid landscapes where only the most adaptable animals could survive. These extreme seasonal variations may have been a crucial factor in early dinosaur evolution. Animals that could survive both the abundance of wet seasons and the scarcity of dry seasons would have had significant advantages over more specialized competitors. The dietary flexibility and physiological adaptations of early dinosaurs may have been key factors in their ability to thrive in these variable environments. The volcanic activity that characterized the Ischigualasto region during the late Triassic provides another crucial piece of the early dinosaur puzzle. These weren't just occasional eruptions, but sustained periods of volcanic activity that would have dramatically altered local environments and created both challenges and opportunities for the animals living there. Volcanic ash deposits found throughout the formation tell the story of a landscape repeatedly blanketed by fine particles that would have affected plant growth, water quality, and animal behavior. But rather than being purely destructive, this volcanic activity may have actually benefited early dinosaurs in unexpected ways. The ash deposits created nutrient-rich soils that supported lush plant growth during favorable conditions. The minerals released by weathering volcanic rocks would have enhanced the nutritional quality of plants, potentially providing better resources for herbivorous animals, and by extension, the carnivores that preyed on them. More importantly, the episodic nature of volcanic activity would have created a patchwork of habitats at different stages of recovery. Some areas would have been recently disturbed and sparsely vegetated, while others would have had time to develop mature plant communities. This habitat diversity may have favored generalist animals like early dinosaurs over specialists that required specific environmental conditions. The preservation quality at sites like Ischigualasto also reveals something remarkable about early dinosaur bone structure and growth patterns. When paleontologists examine thin sections of early dinosaur bones under microscopes, they find evidence of rapid, continuous growth that's more similar to modern birds than to crocodiles or lizards. The bone tissue of Eoraptor shows a complex network of blood vessels and a fiber structure that indicates fast bone deposition. This suggests that even the earliest dinosaurs had elevated metabolic rates compared to typical reptiles. They weren't sluggish, cold-blooded creatures waiting around for the sun to warm them up. They were active, dynamic animals capable of sustained activity, even in challenging conditions. This metabolic advantage becomes even more significant when we consider the extreme temperature variations that characterize the late Triassic world. The massive continental interior of Pangaea experienced temperature swings that would have been brutal for animals dependent on external heat sources. An animal that could generate and regulate its own body heat would have had enormous advantages in such an environment. But the story of early dinosaur physiology isn't just about metabolism. Recent discoveries have revealed that some early dinosaurs, and possibly all of them, possessed a primitive form of insulation that would later evolve into the complex feathers we see in modern birds. Fossilized impressions of filamentous structures have been found associated with various early dinosaur species, suggesting that fuzzy, hair-like coverings were present from very early in dinosaur evolution. These structures wouldn't have been used for flight, obviously, but they would have provided crucial insulation in a world of temperature extremes. The presence of primitive feathers in early dinosaurs also hints at another important aspect of their biology: their reproductive strategies. Modern birds use elaborate displays of colorful feathers to attract mates and establish social hierarchies. While we can't know for certain, it's possible that even early dinosaurs were using visual displays and complex social behaviors in ways that their reptilian competitors were not. The social implications of early dinosaur behavior become even more intriguing when we consider their nesting and parental care strategies. While direct evidence of early Triassic dinosaur nests is extremely rare, the anatomical features of early dinosaurs suggest they were already developing some of the sophisticated reproductive behaviors that would later characterize the group. The upright posture and improved locomotion of early dinosaurs would have made it easier for adults to move around nesting areas without damaging eggs or young. Their elevated metabolic rates would have allowed them to be more active parents, potentially providing food and protection for their offspring in ways that more sluggish reptiles could not. These behavioral advantages, combined with their physiological adaptations, may explain why dinosaurs were able to survive and eventually thrive, despite being initially outnumbered by other reptile groups. They weren't just better at surviving as individuals, they were better at producing and raising the next generation. The geographic distribution of early dinosaur fossils also tells an important story about how these animals were spreading across the ancient world. While the most famous early dinosaur discoveries come from Argentina and Tanzania, fragmentary remains have been found across what was then the southern portion of Pangaea. Fossil evidence suggests that early dinosaurs were present in what is now Brazil, India, and Madagascar during the late Triassic. This widespread distribution indicates that dinosaurs were successfully dispersing across long distances, probably following river systems and coastal regions where resources were more reliable. The ability to disperse effectively would have been crucial for early dinosaur success. In the harsh, seasonally variable climate of the late Triassic, local populations could easily be wiped out by droughts, floods, or volcanic activity. Groups that could quickly recolonize disturbed areas or find new territories when conditions became unfavorable would have had significant survival advantages. This dispersal ability may have been enhanced by the social behaviors that early dinosaurs were beginning to develop. Animals that travel in groups are often more successful at long-distance dispersal than solitary species. They can share information about resources and dangers, provide mutual protection, and maintain genetic diversity even in small founding populations. The evidence for early dinosaur social behavior is admittedly indirect, but several lines of evidence suggest that these animals were more gregarious than typical reptiles. The bone beds where multiple early dinosaur skeletons are found together could indicate that these animals were living in groups, though it's also possible that they were simply attracted to the same favorable areas. More compelling evidence comes from the brain structure of early dinosaurs. CT scans of early dinosaur skulls reveal brain cases that are proportionally larger than those of their reptilian contemporaries, with enlarged areas associated with sensory processing and coordination. These neurological adaptations suggest animals capable of more complex behaviors, including potentially the social coordination necessary for group living. The sensory capabilities of early dinosaurs were also becoming increasingly sophisticated. Analysis of early dinosaur skull structure reveals enlarged optic regions, suggesting that vision was becoming increasingly important for these animals. This makes sense for active, day-hunting predators and for animals that might have been using visual displays for social communication. Enhanced vision would have provided numerous advantages in the late Triassic world. Better predators could more effectively track and capture prey. Better herbivores could spot predators from greater distances and identify the most nutritious plant materials. And animals with superior vision could navigate more effectively through the complex, seasonally changing landscapes of Pangaea. But perhaps most intriguingly, some early dinosaurs show evidence of enhanced hearing capabilities. The inner ear structures of species like Eoraptor are more complex than those of typical reptiles, suggesting improved ability to detect and process acoustic information. Advanced hearing would have been valuable for detecting predators and prey, but it also opens up the possibility that early dinosaurs were using vocalizations for communication. Modern birds, the descendants of dinosaurs, are among the most vocal animals on Earth, using complex songs and calls for everything from territory defense to mate attraction. While we can't know what early dinosaurs sounded like, the anatomical evidence suggests they were capable of producing and detecting a wider range of sounds than their reptilian contemporaries. In the dense forests and varied landscapes of the late Triassic, acoustic communication would have been a valuable tool for maintaining social cohesion and coordinating group activities. The technological advances that have revolutionized our understanding of early dinosaurs extend far beyond traditional fossil preparation and analysis. Chemical analysis of early dinosaur bones and teeth has revealed details about diet, migration patterns, and even seasonal behaviors that would have been impossible to determine from morphology alone. Isotope analysis of tooth enamel can reveal what kinds of plants an animal was eating and whether it was getting its water from rivers, lakes, or direct precipitation. These chemical signatures preserve information about ancient ecosystems and climate conditions with remarkable precision. For early dinosaurs like Eoraptor, isotope analysis has confirmed the evidence from tooth structure that these animals had varied diets. The chemical signatures in their teeth show they were consuming both plant and animal materials, and that their diet varied seasonally depending on resource availability. Even more remarkably, trace element analysis can sometimes reveal information about an animal's geographic movements during its lifetime. As animals move between different geological regions, they incorporate different chemical signatures into their bones and teeth. By analyzing these signatures, paleontologists can sometimes track the migration patterns of individual animals that died hundreds of millions of years ago. This kind of chemical detective work has revealed that some early dinosaurs were more mobile than previously thought, moving significant distances between different parts of their ancient landscape. This mobility would have been another advantage in the variable climate of the late Triassic, allowing animals to track resources and escape unfavorable conditions. The microscopic analysis of early dinosaur fossils has also revealed unexpected details about their growth and development. Unlike modern reptiles, which typically show distinct growth rings in their bones corresponding to seasonal variations in growth rate, early dinosaurs show evidence of more continuous, rapid growth throughout their lives. This growth pattern is more similar to what we see in modern birds and mammals, animals with elevated metabolic rates and active lifestyles. It provides additional evidence that early dinosaurs had already evolved many of the physiological characteristics that would make them so successful throughout the Mesozoic era. The rapid growth rates of early dinosaurs also help explain how they were able to compete effectively with other reptile groups, despite starting from relatively small body sizes. A small animal that can grow quickly to a larger size has significant advantages over a small animal that remains small throughout its life. Fast growth would have allowed young dinosaurs to quickly escape the size classes where they were vulnerable to predation and to reach reproductive maturity sooner than their competitors. In unstable environments where populations could be quickly decimated by natural disasters, the ability to mature and reproduce rapidly would have been a crucial survival advantage. The study of early dinosaur reproduction has also benefited from advances in our understanding of modern bird biology. Since birds are the direct descendants of dinosaurs, their reproductive strategies provide important clues about how their ancient relatives might have behaved. Modern birds show an enormous diversity of reproductive strategies, from species that lay single eggs and provide intensive parental care to others that lay dozens of eggs with minimal parental investment. This diversity suggests that early dinosaurs may have been experimenting with different reproductive approaches as they adapted to various ecological niches. The size and structure of early dinosaur eggs, when they can be found and definitively associated with specific species, provide clues about parental care strategies. Larger eggs with thicker shells suggest species that invested heavily in individual offspring, while smaller, thinner-shelled eggs might indicate species that relied more on producing large numbers of offspring. Unfortunately, definitively linking eggs to specific early dinosaur species remains challenging. The preservation conditions required for eggs are different from those that preserve adult skeletons, and egg fossils are much rarer than bone fossils, especially for small early dinosaur species. However, when early dinosaur eggs are found, they often show characteristics that distinguish them from the eggs of other reptile groups. Dinosaur eggs typically have a distinctive crystalline shell structure and are often found in organized nests rather than scattered randomly across the landscape. The nesting behavior implied by organized dinosaur egg sites suggests that even early dinosaurs were showing more complex reproductive behaviors than typical reptiles. Rather than simply laying eggs and abandoning them, these animals were selecting specific nest sites and arranging their eggs in patterns that would optimize incubation conditions. This level of behavioral complexity requires neurological sophistication and suggests that the enlarged brain cases found in early dinosaur skulls were being used for more than just improved sensory processing. These animals were capable of planning, decision-making, and complex behaviors that went well beyond the simple stimulus-response patterns typical of most reptiles. The implications of this behavioral complexity extend beyond reproduction to virtually every aspect of early dinosaur ecology. Animals capable of complex behaviors are typically more adaptable to changing conditions and better at exploiting new opportunities than animals with simpler behavioral repertoires. In the rapidly changing world of the late Triassic, this behavioral flexibility may have been just as important as physiological adaptations in determining which animal groups would survive and prosper. Dinosaurs weren't just evolving better bodies, they were evolving better brains, and those better brains were helping them navigate an increasingly complex and challenging world. The story of early dinosaur evolution is ultimately a story about the power of small advantages compounding over time. No single characteristic made early dinosaurs superior to their competitors, but the combination of upright posture, elevated metabolism, behavioral complexity, rapid growth, effective dispersal, and physiological resilience created a package of adaptations that proved remarkably successful. These advantages weren't immediately obvious. Early dinosaurs remained relatively rare throughout most of the late Triassic, competing with numerous other reptile groups that were often larger, more numerous, or better established in key ecological niches. But when environmental conditions changed dramatically at the end of the Triassic, the combination of adaptations that early dinosaurs had been developing proved to be exactly what was needed for survival and success in the new world that was emerging. The transition from the Triassic to the Jurassic wasn't just a change in geological time periods. It was a fundamental reorganization of terrestrial ecosystems. The extinction event that marked this transition eliminated not just individual species, but entire ecological strategies that had been successful for millions of years. In the aftermath of this extinction, the survivors found themselves in a world with abundant ecological opportunities and reduced competition. For dinosaurs, this represented the chance of a lifetime, quite literally. The characteristics they had been developing during their long apprenticeship in the late Triassic world suddenly became the keys to evolutionary success on a scale that would dominate terrestrial ecosystems for the next 165 million years. But understanding when dinosaurs first appeared isn't just about finding the oldest fossils or identifying the most primitive species. It's about recognizing that the very definition of what makes a dinosaur has been evolving along with our scientific understanding. For decades, paleontologists struggled with a fundamental question that sounds simple but proved remarkably complex. What exactly is a dinosaur? It seems like it should be obvious, right? Big, extinct reptiles that lived millions of years ago. But as scientists discovered more fossils and developed more sophisticated analytical techniques, the boundaries between dinosaurs and their closest relatives became increasingly blurred. The challenge lies in the fact that evolution doesn't create neat, distinct categories. It creates gradual transitions, where one group of animals slowly develops the characteristics that define another group. Finding the exact moment when a non-dinosaur became a dinosaur is like trying to identify the exact moment when yellow becomes orange in a rainbow. The transition exists, but pinpointing it requires arbitrary decisions about where to draw the line. Modern paleontologists define dinosaurs based on a specific set of anatomical characteristics that distinguish them from other archosaurs. These include features like the structure of the hip socket, the arrangement of ankle bones, and the presence of specific openings in the skull. But many of these characteristics appear at different times in the fossil record, and some early dinosaur candidates possess only some of these features. This is where Nyasasaurus becomes particularly important in the story of dinosaur origins. The fragmentary remains of this ancient creature preserve just enough anatomical detail to suggest dinosaurian characteristics, but not enough to definitively confirm its status as a true dinosaur. It exists in that frustrating grey area where science intersects with the limitations of the fossil record. The long delta pectoral crest on the upper arm bone of Nyasasaurus is one of the key features that suggests dinosaurian affinity. This bony ridge served as an attachment point for powerful chest muscles that would have been essential for the active lifestyle characteristic of dinosaurs. But similar features appear in other archosaur groups, making it difficult to use this characteristic alone as definitive evidence. More compelling is the microscopic structure of Nyasasaurus bones. When paleontologists cut thin sections and examine them under powerful microscopes, they find evidence of the rapid, continuous bone growth that characterizes dinosaurs. The bone tissue shows a complex network of blood vessels and a fiber structure that indicates fast deposition, very different from the slower, more cyclical growth patterns seen in typical reptiles. This histological evidence is particularly important because bone growth patterns reflect fundamental aspects of an animal's physiology and lifestyle. Rapid bone growth requires elevated metabolic rates and active behavior patterns. It's not something that can be easily misinterpreted or confused with other characteristics. But even with this evidence, the fragmentary nature of the Nyasasaurus remains means that its dinosaurian status remains somewhat provisional. Science requires multiple lines of evidence before accepting major conclusions, and single specimens, especially incomplete ones, are always subject to reinterpretation as new discoveries are made. This uncertainty doesn't diminish the importance of Nyasasaurus in our understanding of dinosaur origins. Instead, it highlights the dynamic, provisional nature of scientific knowledge. Each new discovery has the potential to confirm, refine, or completely overturn our understanding of ancient life. The story of how Nyasasaurus was finally recognized and described also illustrates the sometimes chaotic nature of paleontological research. The bones sat in collections for decades, examined by multiple researchers before anyone fully recognized their significance. This wasn't due to incompetence or oversight, but rather to the gradual accumulation of knowledge that makes certain interpretations possible. When Francis Rex Parrington first collected these fossils in the 1930s, paleontologists had a very different understanding of early dinosaur evolution. The concept of dinosaur origins was based on a much smaller sample of fossils, and the analytical techniques for studying bone microstructure didn't exist. What seemed like interesting but unremarkable reptile fragments in the 1930s could only be recognized as potentially revolutionary discoveries decades later, when scientific knowledge had advanced enough to provide the proper context. This pattern repeats throughout the history of paleontology. Many of the most important discoveries spent years or even decades in collections before their significance was recognized. It's a reminder that scientific progress often depends not just on new discoveries, but on new ways of interpreting old discoveries. The formal description of Neasosaurus in 2013 also demonstrates how modern paleontology has become increasingly collaborative and technologically sophisticated. The research team that finally published the description included specialists in anatomy, histology, phylogenetics, and geochronology. They used CT scanning, microscopic analysis, chemical dating, and statistical modeling to extract every possible piece of information from the fragmentary remains. This multidisciplinary approach has become the standard in modern paleontology, reflecting both the complexity of the questions being asked and the sophistication of the tools available to answer them. Understanding when dinosaurs first appeared requires not just finding old bones, but integrating evidence from geology, chemistry, physics, and biology to reconstruct ancient worlds with unprecedented precision. The techniques used to study Neasosaurus and other early dinosaurs have applications far beyond paleontology. The same methods used to analyze ancient bone growth can be applied to understanding bone diseases in modern humans. The statistical approaches used to reconstruct evolutionary relationships help biologists understand everything from the spread of infectious diseases to the conservation of endangered species. This interconnectedness of scientific disciplines is one of the most exciting aspects of modern research. Questions about when dinosaurs first appeared connect to fundamental issues in evolutionary biology, climate science, and even astrobiology. Understanding how life responds to mass extinctions and environmental change has obvious relevance for understanding our own impact on the planet. The global nature of early dinosaur discoveries also reveals important patterns about how life spreads and evolves across different environments. The fact that early dinosaur fossils have been found on multiple continents suggests that these animals were successful dispersers, capable of crossing geographic barriers and adapting to different local conditions. During the late Triassic, the supercontinent Pangaea was beginning to show signs of the rifting that would eventually break it apart. Volcanic activity associated with this rifting created mountain ranges, rift valleys, and new ocean basins that would have presented both barriers and corridors for animal movement. Early dinosaurs appear to have been particularly successful at navigating this changing landscape. Their upright posture and efficient locomotion would have made them effective long-distance travelers, while their dietary flexibility would have allowed them to survive in different environments with varying food resources. The presence of similar early dinosaur species in what are now South America and Africa suggests that these animals were spreading across Pangaea while the continents were still connected. But as the continents began to separate, dinosaur populations would have become isolated, setting the stage for the explosive diversification that would characterize the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. This geographic context helps explain why the earliest definitive dinosaur fossils come from a relatively small number of locations. It's not that dinosaurs were geographically restricted during their early evolution, but rather that the geological conditions necessary for fossil preservation were only present in certain areas. The Ischigualasto Formation in Argentina and the Manda Formation in Tanzania represent unusual combinations of environmental conditions, sedimentation rates, and chemical processes that favored fossil preservation. Most early dinosaur populations probably lived in areas where the geological conditions were unsuitable for creating fossils, leaving no permanent record of their existence. This preservation bias means that our understanding of early dinosaur diversity and distribution is almost certainly incomplete. For every early dinosaur species we've discovered, there were probably dozens that lived and died without leaving any trace in the fossil record. Recent advances in fossil preparation and analysis techniques are helping to extract more information from previously studied specimens, sometimes revealing new species that had been overlooked or misidentified. High-resolution CT scanning can reveal anatomical details that are invisible to traditional preparation methods, while improved chemical analysis can provide information about diet, habitat, and behavior. These technological advances are also making it possible to study fossils that were previously considered too fragmentary or poorly preserved to be useful. Specimens that were dismissed as unidentifiable scraps are being re-examined with modern techniques, sometimes yielding surprising results. The story of early dinosaur evolution is far from complete. New discoveries are constantly refining our understanding of when, where, and how dinosaurs first appeared. Each new fossil has the potential to push back the origin date, reveal new aspects of early dinosaur biology, or challenge existing ideas about dinosaur relationships. Current research is focusing on several key areas that promise to advance our understanding significantly. Improved dating techniques are providing more precise ages for fossil-bearing rock formations, helping to establish more accurate timelines for early dinosaur evolution. Enhanced analytical methods are revealing new details about early dinosaur physiology, behavior, and ecology. Perhaps most importantly, paleontologists are expanding their search for early dinosaur fossils to new geographic areas and geological formations. Regions that were previously unexplored or considered unpromising are yielding new discoveries that fill important gaps in our knowledge. The search for even earlier dinosaurs continues in older rock formations around the world. If dinosaurs really did originate in the Middle Triassic as suggested by Nyasasaurus, then there should be other early dinosaur fossils waiting to be discovered in rocks of similar age. These older fossils, if they exist, would provide crucial information about the environmental conditions and evolutionary pressures that led to dinosaur origins. They might reveal whether dinosaurs evolved gradually from their archosaur ancestors or appeared relatively suddenly in response to specific environmental changes. The question of dinosaur origins also connects to broader questions about the nature of evolutionary innovation. How do major new groups of organisms arise? What combination of environmental opportunity, genetic variation, and developmental flexibility allows certain lineages to achieve remarkable evolutionary success? Dinosaurs represent one of the most successful vertebrate radiations in Earth's history, ultimately giving rise to everything from tiny hummingbirds to massive sauropods. Understanding how this radiation began provides insights into the fundamental processes that drive evolutionary change and biological diversity. The story of when dinosaurs first appeared is ultimately a story about time, change, and the remarkable ability of life to adapt and diversify. It's about creatures that started small and insignificant, but possessed the right combination of characteristics to eventually dominate terrestrial ecosystems for over 150 million years. But it's also a story about human curiosity and the scientific process. It's about researchers spending decades in remote locations, carefully excavating fragile fossils from ancient rocks. It's about the slow accumulation of evidence and the gradual refinement of ideas. It's about the excitement of discovery and the satisfaction of understanding. The early dinosaurs that lived 230 to 240 million years ago had no way of knowing that their descendants would one day capture the imagination of an entirely different species that wouldn't evolve for another 230 million years. They were simply trying to survive in a harsh and changing world, using whatever advantages evolution had provided them. Yet those ancient creatures, no bigger than dogs and living in the shadow of more dominant reptile groups, carried within their bones and DNA the potential for one of the most remarkable evolutionary stories ever told. Their success reminds us that in evolution, as in life, it's not always the biggest or strongest that survive, but rather those that are best adapted to changing conditions. The humid forests and arid plains of the late Triassic world have long since vanished, transformed by millions of years of geological change. The massive reptiles that dominated those ancient ecosystems are known only from fossils. But the legacy of those early dinosaurs lives on in every bird that flies overhead, every fossil that emerges from ancient rocks, and every new discovery that adds another piece to the puzzle of life on Earth. Understanding when dinosaurs first appeared isn't just about satisfying scientific curiosity, though that curiosity is certainly important. It's about understanding our place in the grand sweep of evolutionary history, recognizing the contingent nature of life's development, and appreciating the remarkable journey that led from those small, late Triassic reptiles to the incredible diversity of life we see today. The story continues to evolve as new discoveries are made and new analytical techniques are developed. Each field season brings the possibility of finding fossils that will change our understanding of dinosaur origins. Each new study has the potential to reveal previously unknown aspects of early dinosaur biology and ecology. What's certain is that the story of when dinosaurs first appeared will continue to be refined and revised as our knowledge grows. The provisional nature of scientific understanding isn't a weakness, but a strength, reflecting our willingness to change our ideas when new evidence becomes available. The early dinosaurs of the late Triassic were pioneers in every sense of the word, exploring new ways of living in a rapidly changing world. Their evolutionary experiments laid the foundation for one of the most successful groups of animals ever to inhabit our planet. Understanding their story helps us appreciate not just the history of life on Earth, but the ongoing process of evolution that continues to shape the living world around us. From the volcanic landscapes of ancient Argentina to the humid forests of prehistoric Tanzania, from the laboratory benches where fossils are prepared to the computer models where evolutionary relationships are analyzed, the search for dinosaur origins continues. Each fragment of bone, each microscopic detail, each new analytical technique brings us closer to understanding one of the most important transitions in the history of life on Earth. The moment when dinosaurs first appeared may remain forever elusive, lost in the deep time between rock layers and the incomplete nature of the fossil record. But our search for that moment continues to reveal new wonders about the ancient world and the remarkable creatures that inhabited it. In trying to understand when dinosaurs first appeared, we're really trying to understand how innovation happens in evolution, how small changes can lead to revolutionary consequences, and how life finds ways to not just survive, but thrive in even the most challenging circumstances. The puzzle of early dinosaur success becomes even more intriguing when we examine the specific environmental pressures that shaped their evolution during those critical late Triassic years. While the broad strokes of climate and geography provide important context, the devil is truly in the details when it comes to understanding how these relatively small reptiles managed to position themselves for eventual world domination. One of the most overlooked aspects of early dinosaur evolution involves their relationship with the plant communities of their time. The late Triassic world wasn't just hot and seasonal. It was also experiencing a botanical revolution that would fundamentally alter terrestrial ecosystems. The plant communities that early dinosaurs encountered were in transition, with new species evolving and spreading while others faced extinction pressures. The conifer forests that dominated much of the late Triassic landscape were themselves relatively recent evolutionary innovations. These weren't the same types of conifers we see today, but rather ancient lineages experimenting with new strategies for survival in harsh climates. Some of these early conifers developed extensive root systems that could tap into groundwater during dry seasons. Others evolved waxy coatings and needle-like leaves that reduced water loss during the scorching summer months. For herbivorous dinosaurs and the carnivores that preyed on them, these botanical changes created both opportunities and challenges. The nutritional content of different plant species varied dramatically, and animals that could adapt their feeding strategies to exploit new plant resources would have had significant advantages over more specialized competitors. The evidence for this plant-animal co-evolution comes from several sources. Chemical analysis of early dinosaur teeth reveals isotopic signatures that indicate varied plant consumption, suggesting these animals were actively tracking changes in plant community composition and nutritional quality. More remarkably, wear patterns on dinosaur teeth show that even supposedly carnivorous species were occasionally processing plant material, indicating dietary flexibility that went beyond simple opportunistic feeding. This botanical context helps explain one of the persistent mysteries of early dinosaur ecology. Why were omnivorous forms like Eoraptor so successful during the late Triassic, while more specialized carnivores and herbivores remained relatively rare? The answer may lie in the unstable nature of late Triassic plant communities. In environments where plant species composition was constantly changing due to climate fluctuations, volcanic activity, and evolving ecological relationships, animals with flexible feeding strategies would have been better positioned to survive periodic resource shortages. An animal that could switch between hunting small vertebrates during favorable conditions and processing tough plant material during lean times would have been remarkably resilient. But the relationship between early dinosaurs and their plant environment went beyond simple feeding ecology. Recent research has revealed that some early dinosaur species may have been actively modifying their environments in ways that created positive feedback loops for their own success. Evidence from fossil trackways and coprolite deposits suggests that early dinosaurs were creating well-defined pathways through dense vegetation, essentially establishing the first dinosaur highways across the late Triassic landscape. These pathways would have facilitated movement between different resource patches and may have inadvertently created edge habitats that supported different plant communities. The trampling and browsing activities of even small dinosaur populations could have significantly altered local vegetation patterns. Areas of heavy dinosaur activity would have been kept relatively open, creating grassland-like environments in regions that might otherwise have been dominated by dense forest. These open areas would have supported different plant species and attracted different prey animals, creating new ecological opportunities for adaptable predators. This kind of ecosystem engineering represents a level of environmental impact that goes far beyond what we typically associate with small reptiles. It suggests that early dinosaurs were already beginning to exert the kind of large-scale ecological influence that would later characterize dinosaur-dominated ecosystems throughout the Mesozoic. The evidence for early dinosaur ecosystem engineering comes from multiple lines of investigation. Palynological studies, which examine fossilized pollen and spores, show distinct changes in plant community composition in areas where early dinosaur fossils are abundant. These changes include increases in fast-growing, disturbance-adapted plant species and decreases in shade-tolerant forest species. Sedimentological analysis of rock layers containing early dinosaur remains reveals patterns of soil disruption and compaction that are consistent with repeated trampling by groups of medium-sized animals. The distribution of these disturbed areas suggests that early dinosaurs were following regular movement patterns across the landscape, possibly migrating seasonally between different resource areas. Perhaps most intriguingly, some early dinosaur fossil sites show evidence of what paleobotanists call facilitated succession, where the activities of herbivorous animals actually increase plant diversity by creating a mosaic of different habitat types within a single landscape. This ecological phenomenon is common in modern ecosystems dominated by large herbivores, but it was previously unknown in Triassic environments. The implications of this ecosystem engineering extend far beyond early dinosaur ecology. If small populations of early dinosaurs were already modifying their environments in measurable ways, it suggests that the large-scale environmental impacts of later dinosaur communities may have been even more dramatic than previously thought. The late Triassic world was also experiencing significant changes in atmospheric composition that would have affected both plant growth and animal physiology. Carbon dioxide levels were considerably higher than modern values, creating a greenhouse effect that contributed to the warm global climate. But elevated carbon dioxide also affected plant growth in complex ways that would have influenced herbivore ecology. Higher carbon dioxide concentrations typically increase plant growth rates, but they also tend to reduce the protein content and increase the fiber content of plant tissues. This means that herbivorous animals would have needed to consume larger quantities of plant material to meet their nutritional requirements, potentially favoring animals with larger gut capacities and more efficient digestive systems. Early dinosaurs show several anatomical features that suggest they were well adapted to processing large quantities of relatively low-quality plant material. Their upright posture would have provided more space for enlarged digestive organs. Their rapid growth rates indicate efficient nutrient extraction from consumed food, and their behavioral flexibility would have allowed them to seek out the most nutritious plant parts and species. The atmospheric composition of the late Triassic also had direct effects on animal respiration and metabolism. Higher oxygen levels, which characterized parts of the late Triassic, would have supported higher metabolic rates and more sustained activity levels. This atmospheric advantage may have been particularly beneficial for early dinosaurs, which were already showing evidence of elevated metabolism compared to typical reptiles. But perhaps the most significant atmospheric factor affecting early dinosaur evolution was the increasing variability in greenhouse gas concentrations. Volcanic activity associated with the initial stages of Pangean breakup was releasing massive quantities of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. These emissions weren't constant, but occurred in pulses that created rapid, dramatic changes in global climate conditions. Animals that could quickly adjust their behavior and physiology in response to these rapid climate changes would have had enormous survival advantages. Early dinosaurs, with their behavioral flexibility, efficient locomotion, and apparent ability to modify their local environments, may have been uniquely suited to thrive during these periods of atmospheric instability. The volcanic activity that characterized the late Triassic wasn't just affecting atmospheric composition, it was also creating unique geological conditions that influenced early dinosaur evolution in unexpected ways. The extensive lava flows and ash deposits associated with this volcanism created new types of substrates and soil conditions that supported novel plant communities. Some early dinosaur fossil sites show evidence that these animals were actively seeking out areas affected by recent volcanic activity. The mineral-rich soils created by weathering volcanic rocks would have supported particularly nutritious plant growth, making these areas attractive to herbivores and the carnivores that hunted them. The attraction of early dinosaurs to volcanically active areas may also explain some puzzling aspects of their fossil distribution. Many early dinosaur discoveries come from areas that show evidence of periodic volcanic activity, leading some researchers to suggest that dinosaurs were actually more tolerant of volcanic disturbance than their competitors. This tolerance for environmental disturbance fits with other evidence suggesting that early dinosaurs were particularly resilient animals. Their rapid growth rates would have allowed populations to recover quickly from catastrophic events. Their dietary flexibility would have helped them survive periods when normal food sources were disrupted, and their efficient locomotion would have enabled them to quickly recolonize areas after environmental disasters. The relationship between early dinosaurs and volcanic activity becomes even more interesting when we consider the role of mineral nutrition in animal health and reproduction. Volcanic soils are typically rich in trace minerals that are essential for bone development, immune function, and reproductive success. Animals with access to these mineral-rich resources would have had significant advantages in terms of growth rate, disease resistance, and breeding success. Chemical analysis of early dinosaur bones reveals unusually high concentrations of certain trace minerals, suggesting that these animals were indeed accessing mineral-rich food sources. The distribution of these enriched fossils corresponds closely with areas of known late Triassic volcanic activity, providing strong support for the hypothesis that early dinosaurs were actively exploiting volcanically influenced environments. This mineral advantage may have been particularly important for early dinosaur reproduction. Modern studies show that trace mineral availability can dramatically affect eggshell quality, embryonic development, and juvenile survival rates in reptiles and birds. Early dinosaurs with access to mineral-rich volcanic soils would have been able to produce higher quality eggs and raise more successful offspring than competitors limited to mineral-poor environments. The seasonal patterns of late Triassic climate created additional challenges and opportunities for early dinosaur populations. The extreme seasonality characteristic of Pangaean climate meant that resources could be abundant during favorable seasons, but scarce during unfavorable periods. Animals that could efficiently store energy during good times and minimize energy expenditure during lean times would have had crucial survival advantages. Early dinosaurs show several anatomical and physiological adaptations that suggest they were well suited to cope with seasonal resource variation. Their rapid growth rates would have allowed them to quickly take advantage of abundant resources during favorable seasons. Their upright posture and efficient locomotion would have enabled them to travel long distances to find resources during lean times, and their behavioral flexibility would have allowed them to adjust their activity patterns and feeding strategies as conditions changed. Evidence for seasonal behavior patterns in early dinosaurs comes from analysis of growth lines in fossil bones. Unlike modern reptiles, which typically show distinct seasonal growth rings corresponding to periods of slow winter growth, early dinosaur bones show more complex patterns that suggest these animals maintained relatively high activity levels year-round. This pattern of continuous growth and activity would have required sustained access to high-quality food resources and efficient metabolic processes. It suggests that early dinosaurs had already evolved many of the physiological characteristics that would later enable dinosaurs to maintain active lifestyles in diverse climatic conditions. The ability to remain active during unfavorable seasons would have provided early dinosaurs with significant competitive advantages. While their competitors were dormant or minimally active during cold or dry periods, dinosaurs could continue foraging, defending territories, and even reproducing. This year-round activity would have translated into faster population growth rates and more effective exploitation of available resources. But seasonal activity patterns also created new challenges for early dinosaur populations. Year-round activity requires year-round access to food, water, and suitable habitat conditions. This may explain why early dinosaur fossils are often found in association with permanent water sources and areas of high plant productivity. The distribution of early dinosaur fossil sites suggests that these animals were particularly attracted to river valleys, lake margins, and other areas where water and resources remained available throughout the year. These environments would have served as refugia during harsh seasons and as centers for population recovery during favorable periods. The importance of water access for early dinosaur success cannot be overstated. The arid climate that characterized much of Pangaea made freshwater a limiting resource for many animal populations. Species that were efficient at finding, utilizing, and conserving water would have had enormous advantages over those that were less water adapted. Early dinosaurs show several features that suggest superior water conservation abilities compared to their contemporaries. Their kidney structure, inferred from related modern species, would have allowed for efficient water reabsorption and concentrated urine production. Their respiratory systems, again inferred from modern analogues, would have minimized water loss during breathing, and their behavioral patterns suggest they were effective at finding and utilizing scattered water sources. The water conservation abilities of early dinosaurs may have been particularly important during the periodic droughts that affected late Triassic environments. While other animal populations crashed during extended dry periods, dinosaur populations may have been able to maintain themselves by more efficiently utilizing limited water resources. This drought tolerance would have had cascading effects on early dinosaur ecology and evolution. Populations that could survive droughts would have had access to resources that became available when competitors died off or migrated away. They would also have been positioned to rapidly expand their populations when favorable conditions returned. The evidence for early dinosaur drought tolerance comes from multiple sources. Isotopic analysis of dinosaur teeth suggests these animals were obtaining water from a variety of sources, including both surface water and water extracted from food. Bone chemistry indicates that early dinosaurs were able to maintain normal growth and metabolic processes even during periods when other animals showed signs of nutritional stress. Perhaps most significantly, early dinosaur fossil sites often preserve evidence of multiple drought cycles, suggesting that these populations were persisting through repeated environmental challenges, rather than simply getting lucky during a single favorable period. The social implications of early dinosaur drought tolerance are particularly intriguing. Animals that remain active and maintain stable populations during environmental stress often develop more complex social behaviors than species that simply endure harsh periods through dormancy or migration. Evidence for early dinosaur social behavior remains limited, but several tantalizing clues suggest that these animals were developing more complex group interactions than typical reptiles. Fossil trackways occasionally show evidence of multiple individuals moving together in coordinated groups. Bone beds sometimes preserve multiple individuals of the same species in close association, and the brain structure of early dinosaurs suggests enhanced capacity for social information processing. If early dinosaurs were indeed developing complex social behaviors, this would have provided additional advantages during environmental stress. Cooperative behaviors like group foraging, shared vigilance against predators, and communal care of young can dramatically improve survival rates during difficult periods. The development of social behaviors would also have facilitated the rapid population expansion that characterizes successful species during environmental recovery periods. Groups with established social structures can more efficiently exploit new resources and coordinate breeding activities to maximize reproductive success. But social behavior in early dinosaurs remains largely speculative, limited by the challenges of inferring behavior from fossil evidence. What's clear is that early dinosaurs possess several characteristics that typically correlate with social behavior in modern animals, including relatively large brain size, complex sensory systems, and group-living tendencies. The sensory capabilities of early dinosaurs deserve particular attention because they provide insights into how these animals were interacting with their environment and potentially with each other. Analysis of early dinosaur skull structure reveals several features that suggest enhanced sensory processing compared to typical reptiles. The optic regions of early dinosaur brains were proportionally larger than those of their contemporaries, suggesting that vision was becoming increasingly important for these animals. Enhanced visual capabilities would have provided advantages for detecting predators, locating prey, identifying suitable plant foods, and potentially recognizing other members of their own species. The inner ear structure of early dinosaurs also shows modifications that suggest improved hearing capabilities. These anatomical changes would have enhanced their ability to detect sounds associated with predators, prey, environmental hazards, and potentially vocalizations from other dinosaurs. Perhaps most intriguingly, some early dinosaur skulls show evidence of enlarged olfactory regions, suggesting that smell was also becoming increasingly important. Enhanced chemical detection capabilities would have been valuable for tracking prey, avoiding predators, assessing food quality, and potentially detecting chemical signals from other dinosaurs. The combination of enhanced visual, auditory, and chemical senses would have provided early dinosaurs with a much more detailed picture of their environment than was available to animals with simpler sensory systems. This sensory advantage would have translated into better decision-making abilities and more effective responses to both opportunities and threats. Enhanced sensory capabilities also suggest that early dinosaurs were processing more complex information about their environment and potentially using this information to modify their behavior in sophisticated ways. Animals with better sensory systems typically show more flexible behavioral responses and greater ability to learn from experience. The neurological implications of enhanced sensory processing extend beyond simple stimulus detection to more complex cognitive functions like spatial memory, pattern recognition, and even planning. Early dinosaurs with larger, more complex brains may have been capable of remarkably sophisticated behaviors that gave them crucial advantages over competitors with simpler nervous systems. The integration of enhanced sensory capabilities with the other advantages that early dinosaurs were developing, upright posture, efficient locomotion, rapid growth, dietary flexibility, and environmental resilience, created a package of adaptations that was remarkably well suited to the challenging conditions of the late Triassic world. But these individual advantages only tell part of the story. The real key to early dinosaur success may have been the way these different adaptations worked together synergistically, creating combined effects that were greater than the sum of their individual parts. An animal with efficient locomotion and enhanced senses could travel farther to find better resources. An animal with rapid growth and dietary flexibility could quickly take advantage of new opportunities. An animal with environmental resilience and behavioral complexity could survive challenges that eliminated less adaptable competitors. This synergistic combination of adaptations represents a crucial concept in evolutionary biology. The idea that successful evolutionary innovations often involve the integration of multiple characteristics rather than the development of single super adaptations. Early dinosaurs weren't successful because they were the best at any one thing, but because they were good at many things, and these capabilities worked together effectively. The evolutionary success of this integrated approach becomes clear when we examine what happened to early dinosaur populations following the end Triassic extinction event. While many other animal groups suffered dramatic population crashes or complete extinction, dinosaurs not only survived, but rapidly diversified and expanded into new ecological roles. The end Triassic extinction represents one of the most significant turning points in the history of life on Earth. And understanding how early dinosaurs navigated this crisis provides crucial insights into the factors that determine evolutionary success during times of environmental upheaval. The extinction event itself was complex, involving multiple environmental stressors that affected different organisms in different ways. Massive volcanic eruptions associated with the breakup of Pangaea released enormous quantities of greenhouse gases, causing rapid climate change. These same eruptions also released toxic compounds that poisoned terrestrial and marine ecosystems. Changing sea levels and ocean chemistry affected marine organisms, while shifting precipitation patterns disrupted terrestrial plant communities. For many animal groups, this combination of environmental stresses proved overwhelming. The heavily armored archosaurs, despite their impressive defensive adaptations, couldn't cope with the rapid changes in plant communities that eliminated their preferred food sources. The massive Rauisuchians, apex predators of the late Triassic world, found themselves unable to maintain the large prey populations they required for survival. But early dinosaurs, with their package of integrated adaptations, were remarkably well positioned to survive these environmental challenges. Their dietary flexibility allowed them to switch between different food sources as plant and animal communities shifted. Their efficient locomotion enabled them to migrate to areas where conditions remained favorable. Their rapid growth rates allowed populations to recover quickly from temporary setbacks. Perhaps most importantly, their behavioral complexity may have enabled them to develop new survival strategies in response to novel environmental challenges. While less adaptable animals were locked into behavioral patterns that became maladaptive as conditions changed, Dinosaurs may have been able to modify their behavior to exploit new opportunities and avoid new threats. The evidence for dinosaur behavioral innovation during the end Triassic crisis comes from changes in fossil trackway patterns and site distributions. Early Jurassic dinosaur tracks show movement patterns that are distinctly different from those of late Triassic tracks, suggesting that surviving dinosaur populations were exploring new habitats and adopting new behavioral strategies. The rapid post-extinction diversification of dinosaur populations provides additional evidence for their behavioral and ecological flexibility, rather than simply recovering their pre-extinction population levels. Dinosaurs quickly evolved new body forms, new feeding strategies, and new ecological roles that had been previously occupied by extinct groups. This rapid adaptive radiation represents one of the most dramatic examples of evolutionary opportunity exploitation in the fossil record. Within just a few million years of the end Triassic extinction, dinosaurs had evolved everything from tiny insectivores to massive herbivores to sophisticated aquatic predators. The speed of this diversification suggests that early dinosaur populations possessed not just the ability to survive environmental challenges, but also the genetic and developmental flexibility to rapidly evolve new adaptations when opportunities became available. This evolutionary potential may have been just as important as their immediate survival capabilities in determining their long-term success. The story of early dinosaur evolution and survival through the end Triassic extinction provides important lessons about the nature of evolutionary success and the factors that determine which groups thrive during times of environmental change. Success wasn't determined by size, strength, or specialization, but rather by adaptability, integration, and the ability to exploit new opportunities. These lessons remain relevant today as we face our own period of rapid environmental change. Understanding how life has responded to past environmental challenges provides insights into how modern ecosystems might respond to current and future environmental stresses. The early dinosaurs that survived the end Triassic extinction went on to dominate terrestrial ecosystems for over 150 million years, eventually giving rise to the incredible diversity of forms that continues to capture our imagination. But their success story began much earlier, in the challenging world of the late Triassic, where small populations of adaptable reptiles were developing the characteristics that would eventually make them some of the most successful animals in Earth's history. From those humble beginnings in the forests and deserts of Pangaea, dinosaurs would go on to explore virtually every terrestrial habitat on Earth. They would evolve into forms as different as hummingbirds and blue whales, developing innovations in locomotion, feeding, reproduction, and behavior that continue to influence terrestrial ecosystems today. But the foundation for all of this success was laid during those critical early years when dinosaurs were still rare components of late Triassic ecosystems. The characteristics they developed during this period, the integration of multiple adaptations that made them remarkably resilient and adaptable, established the template for one of evolution's greatest success stories. Understanding when dinosaurs first appeared isn't just about identifying the oldest fossils or pinpointing exact dates. It's about recognizing the complex interplay of environmental conditions, evolutionary pressures, and biological innovations that created the opportunity for a new type of animal to emerge and eventually dominate the world. The story continues to unfold as new discoveries reveal additional details about early dinosaur biology, ecology, and evolution. Each new fossil, each analytical technique, each theoretical insight adds another piece to our understanding of how these remarkable animals first appeared and began their journey toward evolutionary dominance. From the volcanic landscapes of the late Triassic to the diverse ecosystems of the Jurassic and beyond, the story of dinosaur origins connects us to fundamental questions about life, evolution, and the remarkable ability of organisms to adapt and thrive in an ever-changing world. The layers of sediment that preserve early dinosaur fossils tell their own remarkable story about the world these creatures inhabited. Each stratum represents thousands of years of environmental history, capturing not just the bones of ancient animals, but the entire ecosystem they lived within. When paleontologists carefully excavate these fossil sites, they're not just uncovering dinosaur skeletons, they're reconstructing entire ancient worlds. The precision required for this work is extraordinary. Modern paleontological excavation involves GPS mapping of every fossil fragment, detailed photography at each stage of excavation, and careful collection of sediment samples for later analysis. Every bone, every tooth, every piece of fossilized wood or leaf is precisely documented before removal. This meticulous approach allows researchers to reconstruct not just what these ancient animals looked like, but how they lived, what they ate, and how they interacted with their environment. The chemical composition of the sediments surrounding early dinosaur fossils provides crucial information about ancient climate conditions. Ratios of different elements in the rock can reveal whether the climate was wet or dry when the sediments were deposited. The presence of certain minerals indicates specific temperature ranges. Even the color of the rock layers provides clues about the oxygen levels in ancient atmospheres. Analysis of these geological contexts has revealed that early dinosaur evolution occurred during a period of unprecedented environmental instability. The late Triassic world was characterized by rapid fluctuations between wet and dry conditions, dramatic temperature swings, and periodic volcanic catastrophes that would have challenged any animal population. Yet early dinosaurs not only survived these challenging conditions, they apparently thrived in them. The fossil record shows that dinosaur diversity was actually increasing during some of the most environmentally unstable periods of the late Triassic, suggesting that these animals were somehow benefiting from the very conditions that were stressing their competitors. One explanation for this paradoxical success lies in the concept of environmental tracking. Rather than simply enduring harsh conditions, early dinosaurs may have been actively following favorable environmental conditions as they shifted across the landscape. Their efficient locomotion and behavioral flexibility would have enabled them to migrate between different areas as local conditions changed. Evidence for this environmental tracking comes from the geographic distribution of dinosaur fossils across different time periods. Early dinosaur species that first appear in one region during favorable climatic conditions later show up in different regions where similar conditions had developed. This pattern suggests coordinated movement of dinosaur populations in response to changing environmental conditions. The ability to track favorable environments would have provided enormous advantages during the unstable climate conditions of the late Triassic. While sedentary species were forced to endure whatever conditions developed in their local areas, mobile species could maintain themselves in optimal conditions by moving to new locations as needed. But environmental tracking requires more than just the ability to move long distances. It also requires sophisticated environmental sensing capabilities and the behavioral flexibility to respond appropriately to environmental cues. Early dinosaurs show evidence of both enhanced sensory systems and complex behavioral patterns that would have supported effective environmental tracking. The development of these capabilities may have been driven by the extreme environmental variability that characterized the late Triassic world. Animals that could detect subtle environmental changes and respond appropriately would have had crucial survival advantages over those that simply reacted to environmental stress after it had already become severe. The fossil record provides several lines of evidence for sophisticated environmental sensing in early dinosaurs. Changes in bone chemistry that correlate with environmental conditions suggest these animals were physiologically responding to subtle environmental cues. Variations in growth patterns that anticipate seasonal changes indicate they were adjusting their biology in advance of predictable environmental shifts. Perhaps most remarkably, some early dinosaur fossil sites show evidence of what appears to be anticipatory behavior, where dinosaur populations seem to have abandoned areas before environmental conditions became severely unfavorable. This kind of forward-looking behavior requires not just environmental sensing, but also the cognitive ability to integrate current conditions with past experience to predict future changes. The neurological complexity implied by such sophisticated environmental responses fits with other evidence for enhanced cognitive abilities in early dinosaurs. The enlarged brain cases found in many early dinosaur skulls weren't just supporting better sensory processing, they were likely also enabling more complex decision-making processes. Enhanced cognitive abilities would have provided early dinosaurs with advantages that extended far beyond environmental tracking. Better decision-making would have improved their success in finding food, avoiding predators, selecting mates, and caring for offspring. These cognitive advantages would have compounded over time, leading to increasingly successful dinosaur populations. The relationship between cognitive enhancement and environmental variability represents an important theme in evolutionary biology. Unpredictable environments typically favor animals with flexible behavioral repertoires and strong learning abilities. The extreme environmental variability of the late Triassic world may have provided particularly strong selection pressure for enhanced cognitive abilities in early dinosaur lineages. This cognitive enhancement hypothesis helps explain several puzzling aspects of early dinosaur evolution. Why did dinosaurs develop such complex social behaviors so early in their evolutionary history? Why were they so successful at exploiting new ecological opportunities? Why were they able to rapidly diversify after the end Triassic extinction? Enhanced cognitive abilities provide a unified explanation for all of these patterns. The social implications of enhanced cognition in early dinosaurs are particularly intriguing. Modern animals with complex cognitive abilities typically show sophisticated social behaviors, including cooperation, communication, and even cultural transmission of learned behaviors. If early dinosaurs possessed similar cognitive capabilities, they may have been developing social systems that were far more complex than anything seen in typical reptiles. Evidence for complex social behavior in early dinosaurs remains indirect but suggestive. Trackway sites occasionally preserve evidence of coordinated movement by multiple individuals. Some fossil sites show evidence of size-sorted groups, suggesting that animals of different ages were associating together in structured ways. The brain structure of early dinosaurs shows enlarged regions associated with social information processing in modern animals. If early dinosaurs were indeed developing complex social systems, this would have provided additional advantages during the challenging environmental conditions of the late Triassic. Social groups can share information about resource locations, coordinate responses to threats, and provide mutual assistance during difficult periods. Social cooperation would have been particularly valuable for early dinosaur populations trying to track favorable environmental conditions across large geographic areas. Groups that could effectively communicate information about distant resource patches or environmental changes would have been much more successful at environmental tracking than solitary individuals. The potential for cultural transmission of learned behaviors in social dinosaur groups raises fascinating possibilities about early dinosaur adaptation. If experienced individuals could teach younger animals about environmental patterns, resource locations, or behavioral strategies, dinosaur populations could have accumulated and transmitted adaptive knowledge across generations. This kind of cultural evolution would have accelerated the rate at which dinosaur populations could adapt to changing conditions. Rather than relying solely on genetic evolution, which occurs over many generations, cultural evolution can enable rapid behavioral adaptation within a single generation. Evidence for cultural transmission in early dinosaurs would be extremely difficult to detect in the fossil record, but some tantalizing clues exist. Regional variations in dinosaur behavior patterns, inferred from trackway and site distributions, suggest that different populations may have been developing locally adapted behavioral traditions. The geographic clustering of certain behavioral patterns, even when environmental conditions are similar across different regions, is often interpreted as evidence for cultural transmission in modern animal populations. Similar patterns in the early dinosaur fossil record could indicate that these ancient animals were capable of cultural learning. But whether or not early dinosaurs were capable of cultural transmission, their enhanced cognitive abilities clearly provided significant advantages during the environmental challenges of the late Triassic. The combination of behavioral flexibility, environmental sensing, and decision-making capabilities created a suite of adaptations that was particularly well suited to unstable environmental conditions. These cognitive advantages, combined with the physiological and anatomical adaptations that early dinosaurs were developing, created an integrated package of characteristics that made them remarkably successful during one of the most challenging periods in Earth's history. The success of this integrated adaptation strategy becomes even more apparent when we examine the specific environmental challenges that early dinosaurs faced during the late Triassic. These weren't just general environmental stresses, but specific combinations of conditions that would have tested every aspect of an animal's adaptive capabilities. One of the most significant challenges involved the interaction between seasonal climate variations and volcanic activity. The late Triassic world experienced both extreme seasonal variations in temperature and precipitation, and periodic volcanic eruptions that could dramatically alter local environmental conditions. The combination of these two types of environmental variability created what ecologists call compound disturbances, where multiple environmental stresses interact to create conditions that are more challenging than either stressor alone. Animals adapted to cope with seasonal variations might be overwhelmed when volcanic activity disrupted normal seasonal patterns. Species adapted to volcanic disturbance might struggle when eruptions occurred during already stressful seasonal periods. Early dinosaurs show evidence of adaptations that enabled them to cope with both types of environmental variability simultaneously. Their rapid growth rates allowed them to take advantage of favorable conditions whenever they occurred, regardless of whether they followed normal seasonal patterns. Their dietary flexibility enabled them to exploit whatever food sources became available after volcanic disturbances disrupted normal food webs. Perhaps most importantly, their enhanced cognitive abilities may have enabled them to recognize and respond appropriately to novel combinations of environmental conditions that had no precedent in their evolutionary history. This ability to respond adaptively to unprecedented situations would have been crucial during periods of compound environmental disturbance. The evidence for early dinosaur success during compound disturbances comes from fossil sites that preserve evidence of both seasonal environmental stress and volcanic activity. These sites often contain higher proportions of dinosaur fossils relative to other animal groups, suggesting that dinosaurs were maintaining their populations more successfully than competitors during these challenging periods. The ability to cope with compound environmental disturbances represents a sophisticated form of environmental resilience that goes well beyond simple tolerance for harsh conditions. It requires integration of multiple adaptive strategies and the flexibility to modify these strategies as conditions change. This type of resilience would have been particularly valuable during the complex environmental changes that characterize the end Triassic extinction event. Rather than facing a single environmental stressor, animals during this period were confronted with multiple, interacting stressors that created unprecedented conditions. The volcanic activity that contributed to the end Triassic extinction wasn't just releasing greenhouse gases and toxic compounds, it was also altering precipitation patterns, disrupting ocean currents, and creating acid rain that affected terrestrial plant communities. These changes were occurring simultaneously and interacting with each other in complex ways. Animals that could only cope with one type of environmental stress would have been overwhelmed by this combination of challenges. But animals that had already developed integrated responses to compound disturbances would have been much better positioned to survive. The rapid post-extinction recovery and diversification of dinosaur populations provides strong evidence that these animals possess this kind of integrated environmental resilience. Rather than simply hanging on during the extinction event, dinosaurs seem to have been positioned to quickly exploit the new opportunities that became available as ecosystems reorganized. This pattern of not just surviving but thriving during environmental crises would characterize dinosaur evolution throughout their long history. Time and again, dinosaurs showed remarkable ability to not only endure environmental challenges, but to exploit the opportunities these challenges created. The foundation for this pattern was established during the early stages of dinosaur evolution, when these animals were developing the integrated suite of adaptations that made them so resilient. The environmental challenges of the late Triassic world provided the testing ground where these adaptations were refined and perfected. Understanding this early period of dinosaur evolution provides crucial insights into how major evolutionary innovations develop and succeed. Dinosaurs weren't successful because they evolved a single superior adaptation, but because they developed a coordinated set of characteristics that worked together synergistically. This integrated approach to adaptation represents an important principle in evolutionary biology. The most successful evolutionary innovations often involve the coordination of multiple traits rather than the perfection of individual characteristics. Early dinosaurs exemplify this principle, showing how the integration of anatomical, physiological, behavioral, and cognitive adaptations can create evolutionary success that exceeds the sum of individual improvements. The story of early dinosaur evolution also illustrates the importance of timing in evolutionary success. The characteristics that made early dinosaurs successful weren't necessarily superior to those of their competitors under all conditions. Instead, these characteristics were particularly well suited to the specific environmental challenges of the late Triassic world. In more stable environmental conditions, the energy costs of maintaining rapid growth rates, complex sensory systems, and enhanced cognitive abilities might have outweighed their benefits. But in the unstable world of the late Triassic, these characteristics provided crucial survival advantages that more than compensated for their costs. This context-dependent nature of evolutionary success helps explain why dinosaur origins occurred when they did, rather than at some earlier or later time. The specific combination of environmental conditions that characterized the late Triassic world created unique selection pressures that favored the particular suite of adaptations that early dinosaurs were developing. The recognition that evolutionary success is often context-dependent has important implications for understanding both past and future evolutionary processes. It suggests that major evolutionary innovations are not inevitable, but depend on specific environmental conditions that favor particular combinations of traits. For early dinosaurs, the late Triassic world provided the perfect environmental context for the development and refinement of the adaptations that would eventually make them one of the most successful groups of animals in Earth's history. The challenges of this ancient world tested every aspect of their biology and behavior, ultimately producing animals that were remarkably well equipped for evolutionary success. The legacy of these early adaptations continued to influence dinosaur evolution throughout the Mesozoic era and beyond. The basic body plan established by early dinosaurs, with its emphasis on efficient locomotion, rapid growth, and behavioral flexibility, provided the foundation for all subsequent dinosaur evolution. Even today, in the birds that are the living descendants of dinosaurs, we can see evidence of adaptations that first appeared in those small late Triassic reptiles. The rapid growth rates, complex behaviors, and sophisticated sensory systems that characterize modern birds all have their roots in the evolutionary innovations of early dinosaurs. The story of when dinosaurs first appeared is ultimately a story about innovation, adaptation, and the remarkable ability of life to not just survive, but thrive in challenging conditions. From the volcanic landscapes of ancient Pangaea to the diverse ecosystems of today, the influence of those early dinosaur adaptations continues to shape the living world around us. Understanding this ancient success story provides insights into the fundamental processes that drive evolution and determine which organisms succeed during times of environmental change. As we face our own period of rapid environmental change, the lessons learned from early dinosaur evolution become increasingly relevant for understanding how life responds to environmental challenges. The small reptiles that first appeared in the late Triassic world had no way of knowing that their descendants would one day dominate terrestrial ecosystems for over 150 million years. They were simply trying to survive in a harsh and unpredictable world, using whatever advantages evolution had provided them. But those advantages, refined through millions of years of environmental challenge and evolutionary innovation, proved to be remarkably durable and successful. The integrated suite of adaptations that enabled early dinosaurs to survive the challenges of the late Triassic world also positioned them for long-term evolutionary success on a scale rarely seen in the history of life. The search for the earliest dinosaurs continues, with new discoveries constantly refining our understanding of when and how these remarkable animals first appeared. Each new fossil, each analytical technique, each theoretical insight adds another piece to the puzzle of dinosaur origins. What emerges from this ongoing research is a picture of early dinosaur evolution as a complex process involving the integration of multiple adaptations, the exploitation of environmental opportunities, and the development of innovative solutions to environmental challenges. The story of when dinosaurs first appeared is not just about dates and fossil discoveries, but about understanding one of evolution's greatest success stories and the lessons it provides for understanding life on Earth. On Earth, the precision of modern paleontological research has revolutionized our understanding of these ancient ecosystems in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few decades ago. When researchers examine early dinosaur fossils today, they're not just looking at bones. They're reading chemical signatures that reveal what these animals ate for breakfast 240 million years ago. They're analyzing microscopic structures that tell us how fast these creatures grew. They're extracting information about ancient climates from the very atoms that make up fossilized teeth. This level of analytical sophistication has revealed details about early dinosaur biology that challenge many of our basic assumptions about these ancient animals. For instance, the growth rates recorded in early dinosaur bones suggest metabolic processes that were far more dynamic than what we see in modern reptiles. These weren't sluggish, cold-blooded creatures waiting for the sun to warm them up. They were active animals with internal heating systems that kept them moving even when environmental conditions would have shut down their competitors. The bone histology of species like Eoraptor shows continuous rapid deposition of new tissue throughout the growing season. There are no extended periods of slow growth, no obvious seasonal shutdowns. Instead, these animals maintained consistent metabolic activity across varying environmental conditions. This pattern is much more similar to what we see in modern birds and mammals than in typical reptiles. But perhaps even more remarkable than their metabolic capabilities was the sophistication of early dinosaur sensory systems. CT scanning of early dinosaur skulls has revealed brain structures that were proportionally larger and more complex than those of their contemporaries. The regions associated with processing visual information were particularly enlarged, suggesting that early dinosaurs were living in a much more visually oriented world than their competitors. Enhanced vision would have provided numerous advantages in the late Triassic environment. Better predators could track prey more effectively across the varied terrain. More successful herbivores could identify the most nutritious plants and spot approaching dangers from greater distances. And animals with superior vision could navigate more effectively through the complex landscapes created by seasonal flooding and volcanic activity. The inner ear structures of early dinosaurs also show modifications that suggest significantly improved hearing capabilities. These anatomical changes would have enhanced their ability to detect sounds associated with environmental changes, potential threats, and possibly even vocalizations from other members of their own species. The possibility that early dinosaurs were using vocalizations for communication opens up fascinating questions about their social behavior. Modern birds, which are direct descendants of dinosaurs, use complex vocal communications for everything from territory defense to mate selection. While we can't know exactly what early dinosaurs sounded like, the anatomical evidence suggests they possessed the capability for more sophisticated acoustic communication than typical reptiles. Enhanced hearing would have been particularly valuable in the dense vegetation that characterized many late Triassic environments. In forests where visual contact was limited, acoustic signals would have been essential for maintaining social cohesion, coordinating group activities, and avoiding predators. The chemical analysis of early dinosaur teeth has revealed another surprising aspect of their biology. Isotope signatures in tooth enamel show that these animals were accessing water sources that were chemically distinct from what their competitors were using. This suggests that early dinosaurs were either more mobile than other animals, traveling longer distances to find better water sources, or that they were more effective at extracting water from their food. Water management would have been crucial for survival in the arid climate that dominated much of Pangaea during the late Triassic. Animals that could efficiently find, utilize, and conserve water would have had enormous advantages over those that were less water adapted. The ability to survive on limited water would have allowed early dinosaur populations to persist in areas where other animals couldn't maintain themselves. The evidence for superior water conservation in early dinosaurs comes from multiple sources. Their kidney structure, inferred from modern bird and crocodile anatomy, would have allowed for highly efficient water reabsorption. Their respiratory systems would have minimized water loss during breathing, and their behavioral patterns suggest they were skilled at locating scattered water sources across the landscape. But early dinosaur success wasn't just about individual physiological advantages. These animals were also developing behavioral strategies that multiplied the effectiveness of their biological adaptations. Evidence from trackway sites suggests that at least some early dinosaur species were traveling in coordinated groups, sharing information about resource locations and dangers. Group travel would have been particularly beneficial for animals trying to track favorable environmental conditions across large geographic areas. Individuals that discovered good foraging areas or safe water sources could lead others to these locations. Groups could also provide mutual protection during dangerous journeys across unfamiliar territory. The coordination required for effective group travel implies sophisticated communication abilities and social structure. Animals need to be able to signal their intentions, coordinate their movements, and resolve conflicts that arise during travel. This level of behavioral complexity suggests that early dinosaurs had already developed many of the social capabilities that would later characterize more advanced dinosaur communities. The fossil evidence for early dinosaur group behavior comes from several remarkable sites where multiple individuals of the same species are preserved together. These aren't random accumulations of bones washed together by floods. Instead, they appear to represent animals that died together while engaged in coordinated activities. One particularly intriguing site preserves the remains of several early dinosaur individuals of different ages, suggesting that these groups included both adults and juveniles. This age mixing is characteristic of family groups or larger social units, where experienced adults provide guidance and protection for younger animals. The inclusion of juveniles in early dinosaur groups would have provided significant advantages for population survival and growth. Young animals traveling with experienced adults would have been more likely to survive the challenges of finding food, avoiding predators, and navigating unfamiliar terrain. They would also have had opportunities to learn important survival skills through observation and imitation. The potential for learning and cultural transmission in early dinosaur groups raises fascinating possibilities about how these animals adapted to changing conditions. If experienced individuals could teach younger animals about environmental patterns, resource locations, or behavioral strategies, Dinosaur populations could have accumulated and shared adaptive knowledge across generations. This kind of behavioral learning would have accelerated the rate at which dinosaur populations could respond to environmental changes. Rather than relying solely on genetic evolution, which requires many generations, learned behaviors can spread through populations within a single generation. Evidence for learned behavior in early dinosaurs is necessarily indirect, but several patterns in the fossil record are consistent with cultural transmission of adaptive strategies. Regional variations in dinosaur behavior patterns, even when environmental conditions are similar across different areas, suggest that different populations may have been developing locally adapted traditions. The geographic distribution of certain behavioral patterns provides additional support for cultural learning in early dinosaur populations. Behaviors that appear in one region and then spread to adjacent areas over time could indicate transmission of learned strategies between neighboring groups. But whether or not early dinosaurs were capable of cultural learning, their enhanced behavioral capabilities clearly provided significant advantages during the environmental challenges of the late Triassic. The combination of individual intelligence, social coordination, and behavioral flexibility created a suite of adaptations that was particularly effective for surviving in unstable conditions. These behavioral innovations work synergistically with the physiological and anatomical advantages that early dinosaurs were developing. Animals with rapid growth rates and efficient locomotion could more effectively exploit the opportunities identified through enhanced sensory systems and social information sharing. Populations with flexible behavioral repertoires could better utilize the physiological advantages provided by superior water conservation and metabolic capabilities. This integration of multiple types of adaptations represents a crucial factor in early dinosaur success. Rather than excelling in just one area, these animals were developing coordinated improvements across multiple biological systems. The result was a level of overall performance that exceeded what any single adaptation could have provided. The importance of this integrated approach becomes clear when we examine the specific challenges that early dinosaurs faced during the late Triassic. These weren't just general environmental stresses, but complex combinations of conditions that tested every aspect of an animal's adaptive capabilities. Consider the challenge of surviving in an environment where seasonal droughts were periodically interrupted by massive volcanic eruptions. Animals adapted to drought conditions might be overwhelmed when ash falls disrupted their normal water sources. Species adapted to volcanic disturbance might struggle when eruptions occurred during already stressful dry periods. Early dinosaurs show evidence of adaptations that enabled them to cope with both types of environmental stress simultaneously. Their water conservation abilities helped them survive extended droughts. Their behavioral flexibility allowed them to modify their strategies when volcanic activity created new challenges. Their rapid growth rates enabled them to recover quickly when favorable conditions returned. The ability to handle multiple environmental stresses simultaneously represents a sophisticated form of resilience that goes beyond simple tolerance for harsh conditions. It requires the integration of multiple adaptive strategies and the flexibility to modify these strategies as conditions change. This type of integrated resilience would have been particularly valuable during the complex environmental changes that led up to the end Triassic extinction event. Rather than facing a single environmental challenge, animals during this period were confronted with multiple interacting stresses that created unprecedented conditions. The volcanic activity that contributed to the end Triassic extinction was releasing greenhouse gases that caused rapid climate change. These same eruptions were also producing acid rain that damaged plant communities. Changing sea levels were altering coastal environments. Shifting weather patterns were disrupting established migration routes. Animals that could cope with only one type of environmental stress would have been overwhelmed by this combination of challenges. But animals that had developed integrated responses to multiple stressors would have been much better positioned to survive. The success of dinosaurs during and after the end Triassic extinction provides strong evidence that these animals possessed this kind of integrated environmental resilience. Rather than simply enduring the extinction event, dinosaurs were positioned to quickly exploit the new opportunities that became available as ecosystems reorganized. The rapid diversification of dinosaur populations following the end Triassic extinction represents one of the most dramatic examples of evolutionary opportunity exploitation in the fossil record. Within just a few million years, dinosaurs evolved into forms that filled virtually every available terrestrial niche. This explosive diversification wasn't just about surviving the extinction event. It was about having the biological and behavioral flexibility to rapidly evolve new adaptations when opportunities became available. The foundation for this flexibility had been established during the challenging conditions of the late Triassic, when early dinosaur populations were developing their integrated suite of adaptive capabilities. The environmental pressures that shaped early dinosaur evolution also influenced the development of their reproductive strategies. The unstable conditions of the late Triassic would have favored animals that could reproduce successfully, even when resources were limited or unpredictable. Analysis of early dinosaur reproductive biology suggests that these animals were developing more sophisticated parental care strategies than typical reptiles. Their upright posture would have made it easier for adults to move around nesting areas without damaging eggs or young. Their elevated metabolic rates would have allowed them to be more active parents, providing food and protection for offspring. The enhanced cognitive abilities of early dinosaurs would have also contributed to more effective parental care. Animals with better decision-making capabilities would have been more successful at selecting safe nesting sites, protecting eggs from predators, and teaching survival skills to juveniles. Evidence for advanced parental care in early dinosaurs comes from the structure of their eggs and the organization of their nesting sites. Dinosaur eggs show characteristics that distinguish them from those of other reptile groups, including specialized shell structures that suggest more controlled incubation conditions. The arrangement of eggs at early dinosaur nesting sites indicates that these animals were selecting specific locations and organizing their nests to optimize conditions for embryonic development. This level of behavioral sophistication in reproductive activities suggests that early dinosaurs were investing significantly more effort in offspring care than typical reptiles. Enhanced parental care would have provided important advantages during the challenging environmental conditions of the late Triassic. Young animals that received more protection and guidance from their parents would have been more likely to survive to reproductive age. Populations with more effective parental care would have maintained higher survival rates during difficult periods. The reproductive advantages of early dinosaurs were complemented by their superior growth and development patterns. Rapid growth rates allowed young dinosaurs to quickly reach sizes where they were less vulnerable to predation. Efficient development meant that populations could recover more quickly from temporary setbacks. The integration of advanced reproductive strategies with other early dinosaur adaptations created a biological system that was remarkably effective at maintaining population stability during unstable environmental conditions. This stability provided the foundation for the long-term success that would characterize dinosaur evolution throughout the Mesozoic era. The story of early dinosaur reproduction also illustrates the importance of life history strategies in evolutionary success. Animals that invest heavily in producing and caring for a smaller number of high-quality offspring often outcompete those that produce many offspring with minimal parental investment, especially in challenging or unpredictable environments. Early dinosaurs appear to have been moving toward the high-investment parental care strategy that would later characterize many advanced dinosaur groups. This shift required significant changes in behavior, physiology, and anatomy, but it provided crucial advantages for surviving in the unstable world of the late Triassic. The development of sophisticated reproductive strategies in early dinosaurs was facilitated by their enhanced cognitive abilities and social behaviors. Animals capable of complex decision-making and social coordination are typically more successful at the behavioral coordination required for effective parental care. The neurological complexity implied by advanced parental care strategies fits with other evidence for enhanced brain function in early dinosaurs. The enlarged brain cases found in early dinosaur skulls weren't just supporting better sensory processing. They were also enabling the complex behavioral coordination required for successful reproduction in challenging conditions. This neurological sophistication would have provided early dinosaurs with advantages that extended far beyond reproduction. Enhanced cognitive abilities would have improved their success at finding food, avoiding predators, navigating complex environments, and responding to novel challenges. The integration of cognitive enhancement with other early dinosaur adaptations created a biological system that was remarkably well suited to the variable and challenging conditions of the late Triassic world. These animals weren't just surviving harsh conditions, they were actively exploiting the opportunities these conditions created. The success of this integrated adaptation strategy becomes even more apparent when we consider the long-term evolutionary consequences of early dinosaur innovations. The characteristics that enabled early dinosaurs to succeed during the late Triassic also positioned them for continued success as environmental conditions changed throughout the Mesozoic era. The behavioral flexibility that helped early dinosaurs cope with late Triassic environmental variability also enabled them to rapidly exploit new ecological opportunities as they became available. The physiological efficiency that conserved resources during harsh conditions also supported the rapid growth and diversification that characterized post-extinction dinosaur evolution. Perhaps most importantly, the integrated nature of early dinosaur adaptations provided a robust foundation for continued evolutionary innovation. Animals with multiple, coordinated adaptive systems are typically more successful at evolving new capabilities than those that rely on single, specialized adaptations. This evolutionary flexibility would prove crucial throughout dinosaur history, enabling these animals to repeatedly adapt to changing conditions and exploit new opportunities over their 165 million year reign as dominant terrestrial vertebrates. The legacy of early dinosaur adaptations extends even to modern ecosystems through their living descendants, the birds. Many of the characteristics that make birds such successful animals today, including rapid growth rates, complex behaviors, sophisticated sensory systems, and advanced parental care, have their roots in the evolutionary innovations of late Triassic dinosaurs. Understanding the origins of these adaptations provides insights into fundamental principles of evolutionary biology and the factors that determine long-term evolutionary success. The story of early dinosaur evolution demonstrates how the integration of multiple adaptive strategies, rather than reliance on single superior characteristics, can create biological systems capable of remarkable resilience and continued innovation. The environmental challenges that shaped early dinosaur evolution also provide important lessons for understanding how life responds to environmental change. The late Triassic world, with its extreme climate variability and periodic catastrophic disturbances, offers a natural laboratory for studying the factors that determine which organisms survive and thrive during periods of environmental instability. The success of early dinosaurs during these challenging conditions wasn't due to luck or chance, but to the development of specific biological and behavioral capabilities that were particularly well suited to variable and unpredictable environments. These capabilities, refined through millions of years of natural selection, created animals that were remarkably resilient and adaptable. As we face our own period of rapid environmental change, the lessons learned from early dinosaur evolution become increasingly relevant. Understanding how life has responded to past environmental challenges provides crucial insights for predicting and managing responses to current and future environmental changes. The small reptiles that first appeared during the late Triassic had no way of knowing that their adaptations would influence terrestrial ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. They were simply responding to the immediate challenges of survival in a harsh and unpredictable world. But those responses, tested and refined through millions of years of environmental challenge, proved to be remarkably durable and successful. The integrated suite of adaptations that enabled early dinosaurs to thrive in the late Triassic world also provided the foundation for one of evolution's greatest success stories. From the volcanic landscapes of ancient Pangaea to the diverse ecosystems of today, the influence of early dinosaur innovations continues to shape our understanding of life on Earth. The story of when dinosaurs first appeared is ultimately a story about adaptation, innovation, and the remarkable ability of life to not just survive, but flourish in the face of extraordinary challenges. The search for dinosaur origins has become increasingly sophisticated as technology advances our ability to peer into deep time with unprecedented precision. When paleontologists examine a fragment of 240-million-year-old bone today, they're not just seeing fossilized calcium phosphate. They're reading a chemical diary that records everything from seasonal temperature fluctuations to the specific plants growing in ancient river valleys. Modern mass spectrometry can detect trace elements in dinosaur teeth that reveal whether these animals were drinking from highland streams or lowland marshes. Laser ablation techniques can sample microscopic portions of fossil bone to determine growth rates with seasonal precision. Even the ratios of different oxygen isotopes preserved in tooth enamel can tell us whether an individual dinosaur experienced drought conditions during specific months of its life. These analytical breakthroughs have revolutionized our understanding of early dinosaur ecology in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just decades ago. We now know that Eoraptor wasn't just an omnivore in the general sense, but that individual animals were switching between plant and animal foods on seasonal cycles tied to resource availability. We can track the migration patterns of individual Herrerasaurus specimens across hundreds of kilometers of ancient landscape. The chemical signatures preserved in early dinosaur fossils reveal a level of environmental awareness and behavioral sophistication that challenges our fundamental assumptions about reptilian intelligence. These weren't simple animals responding to basic stimuli. They were making complex decisions about resource use, movement patterns, and social interactions based on environmental information that we're only now learning to decode. Isotope analysis of Nyasasaurus bone fragments suggests that this earliest possible dinosaur was accessing water sources that were chemically distinct from those used by other animals in the same ecosystem. This pattern indicates either superior mobility or more sophisticated water location abilities, both of which would have provided crucial advantages in the arid climate of Middle Triassic Tanzania. The bone microstructure of early dinosaurs tells an equally fascinating story about their physiological capabilities. When researchers examine thin sections of early dinosaur bones under polarized light microscopy, they find vascular patterns that indicate blood flow rates similar to modern birds rather than typical reptiles. The density of blood vessel channels in early dinosaur bone suggests metabolic rates that were elevated far above what we see in contemporary reptilian groups. This enhanced circulation system would have supported the continuous rapid growth that characterizes early dinosaur bone histology. But it also implies something more significant. These animals possessed cardiovascular systems capable of sustaining high activity levels across a wide range of environmental conditions. They weren't dependent on external heat sources to maintain their activity, giving them enormous advantages over competitors that required specific temperature ranges to function effectively. The respiratory systems of early dinosaurs, inferred from the structure of their vertebrae and rib cages, show adaptations for efficient oxygen extraction that parallel those found in modern birds. The presence of pneumatic features in early dinosaur bones suggests that these animals had already begun developing the complex air sac systems that make bird respiration so remarkably efficient. Enhanced respiratory efficiency would have been particularly valuable in the late Triassic atmosphere, which had different oxygen concentrations than today's air. Animals with more effective oxygen extraction systems could maintain higher activity levels and support larger brain sizes, both of which would have provided competitive advantages in challenging environments. The neurological implications of early dinosaur success become even more intriguing when we examine their sensory capabilities in detail. CT scanning of early dinosaur skulls reveals not just enlarged brain cases, but specific modifications to sensory processing regions that suggest these animals were living in a much richer sensory world than their contemporaries. The optic regions of early dinosaur brains were proportionally larger than those of other archosaurs, but they also show structural modifications that suggest enhanced color vision and motion detection. These visual improvements would have been invaluable for animals navigating the complex, rapidly changing environments of the late Triassic world. Enhanced motion detection would have improved predator avoidance and prey capture abilities. Better color vision would have aided in identifying ripe fruits, healthy plant tissues, and even social signals from other dinosaurs. The ability to distinguish subtle environmental cues through improved vision could have provided early dinosaurs with crucial advantages in resource location and environmental assessment. The auditory systems of early dinosaurs show equally impressive modifications. The inner ear structures of species like Eoraptor are more complex than those of typical reptiles, with enhanced semicircular canal systems that suggest improved balance and spatial orientation. These adaptations would have supported more agile locomotion and potentially more complex behavioral repertoires. But perhaps most significantly, the auditory modifications in early dinosaur skulls suggest enhanced ability to detect and process a wider range of sound frequencies. This capability opens up possibilities for more sophisticated acoustic communication than was previously thought possible in early reptilian groups. The potential for complex vocalizations in early dinosaurs is supported by analysis of their skull pneumatization patterns. Many early dinosaur skulls show evidence of air-filled spaces that could have functioned as resonating chambers, similar to those found in modern birds. While we can't know exactly what early dinosaurs sounded like, the anatomical evidence suggests they possess the structural basis for more complex vocalizations than typical reptiles. Acoustic communication would have been particularly valuable in the dense vegetation that characterized many late Triassic environments. Visual signals would have been limited by thick forest canopies, but acoustic signals could have traveled effectively through dense vegetation to coordinate group activities, maintain social cohesion, and communicate information about resources and dangers. The evidence for sophisticated communication abilities in early dinosaurs fits with other indicators of enhanced social behavior. Trackway sites occasionally preserve evidence of coordinated movement patterns that suggest group travel with specific spatial arrangements. Some formations show multiple early dinosaur species moving together along the same routes, indicating possible mixed species associations. The complexity of these movement patterns goes beyond simple aggregation around resources. The spatial relationships between individual tracks suggest active coordination, with some animals maintaining consistent positions relative to others over extended distances. This kind of coordinated group movement requires communication abilities and social awareness that exceed what we typically see in modern reptiles. Group coordination would have provided numerous advantages for early dinosaur populations. Cooperative foraging could have improved resource location efficiency. Shared vigilance could have enhanced predator detection. Group travel could have enabled exploitation of resources across larger geographic areas than would have been possible for solitary animals. The benefits of group living would have been particularly pronounced during the challenging environmental conditions of the late Triassic. Animals that could share information about resource locations, coordinate responses to environmental changes, and provide mutual assistance during difficult periods would have had significant survival advantages over those that faced these challenges alone. But group living also creates new challenges that require sophisticated behavioral solutions. Animals living in groups must be able to resolve conflicts, coordinate activities, and maintain social cohesion despite individual differences in needs and preferences. The evidence for group behavior in early dinosaurs suggests that these animals had already begun developing the behavioral complexity necessary for successful social living. The development of complex social behaviors in early dinosaurs was facilitated by their enhanced cognitive capabilities, but it also drove further cognitive evolution. Animals living in social groups face more complex decision-making challenges than solitary species, creating selection pressure for enhanced intelligence and behavioral flexibility. The enlarged brain cases of early dinosaurs weren't just supporting better sensory processing and individual decision-making. They were also enabling the social cognition necessary for successful group living. This includes abilities like recognizing individual group members, remembering past social interactions, and predicting the behavior of other group members. Evidence for individual recognition in early dinosaur groups comes from the consistency of spatial relationships in trackway sites. Animals that maintain specific positions relative to particular individuals over extended periods are typically demonstrating individual recognition and preference relationships. This kind of social sophistication requires memory capabilities and decision-making processes that go well beyond simple stimulus-response patterns. The cognitive demands of early dinosaur social life may have been even more complex than simple individual recognition. Some trackway sites suggest that early dinosaur groups included individuals of different ages and possibly different species. Managing the social dynamics of such diverse groups would have required sophisticated communication abilities and conflict resolution strategies. The presence of juveniles in early dinosaur groups has particularly important implications for understanding their social behavior and learning capabilities. Young animals traveling with experienced adults would have had opportunities to learn important survival skills through observation and imitation. This kind of social learning could have accelerated the development of adaptive behaviors and improved juvenile survival rates. Social learning would have been particularly valuable for early dinosaur populations trying to adapt to the rapidly changing conditions of the late Triassic world. Environmental knowledge gained by experienced individuals could have been transmitted to younger animals, allowing populations to maintain adaptive behaviors even as environmental conditions shifted. The potential for cultural transmission of learned behaviors in early dinosaur groups raises fascinating questions about the mechanisms of their success. If different populations were developing and maintaining locally adapted behavioral traditions, this could help explain the rapid geographic expansion and ecological diversification that characterized early dinosaur evolution. Regional variations in early dinosaur behavior patterns inferred from differences in trackway characteristics and site distributions suggest that different populations may have been developing distinct behavioral approaches to similar environmental challenges. This kind of behavioral diversity could have provided early dinosaur populations with enhanced resilience to environmental change. But whether or not early dinosaurs were capable of cultural learning, their enhanced behavioral capabilities clearly provided significant advantages during the environmental challenges of the late Triassic. The combination of individual intelligence, social coordination, and behavioral flexibility created a suite of adaptations that was remarkably effective for surviving in unpredictable conditions. These behavioral innovations worked in concert with the physiological and anatomical advantages that early dinosaurs were developing. Enhanced sensory systems provided better environmental information. Improved locomotion enabled more effective exploitation of scattered resources. Rapid growth rates supported quick recovery from environmental setbacks. Advanced social behaviors facilitated group coordination and information sharing. The integration of these multiple adaptive systems created biological capabilities that exceeded what any single adaptation could have provided. Early dinosaurs weren't just better at individual tasks than their competitors. They were better at coordinating multiple biological systems to achieve overall performance advantages that were difficult for other animals to match. This integrated approach to adaptation becomes even more impressive when we consider the specific environmental challenges that early dinosaurs were facing. The late Triassic world wasn't just harsh in general terms. It presented specific combinations of environmental stresses that tested every aspect of an animal's adaptive capabilities. Consider the challenge of surviving in regions where seasonal droughts were interrupted by periodic volcanic eruptions that altered local hydrology. Animals adapted to finding water during dry periods might be overwhelmed when ash falls contaminated their usual water sources. Species adapted to volcanic disturbance might struggle when eruptions occurred during already stressful drought conditions. So there you have it. The story of when dinosaurs first appeared on Earth isn't just about finding the oldest bones or pinpointing exact dates. It's about understanding one of the most remarkable evolutionary success stories ever written in stone. From those small, dog-sized creatures scurrying through the volcanic landscapes of ancient Pangaea, to the incredible diversity that would eventually rule the planet for over 150 million years, early dinosaurs proved that survival isn't about being the biggest or strongest. It's about being the most adaptable. Thanks for joining me on this journey through deep time. Let me know in the comments what surprised you most about dinosaur origins, and don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into the mysteries of our ancient world.